Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Drag and Drop Form Builder. In this week's training, I'm going to show you the first ever drag and drop form builder ever built in Excel. It's going to be complete with search, filter, save, add new, and you're going to be able to create your own forms in less than a minute. That's right, it's going to be an incredible training. I'm going to show you step by step how I did it. You're going to learn so much in this training, you will not want to miss it. So let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me this week. I've got an incredible training like nothing I have ever done before. A drag and drop form builder. We're going to be able to drag and drop fields, create brand new forms, and simply by dragging and dropping them, giving them a mount, and you can automatically see them. They'll be automatically formatted. If you don't like it, you can just simply remove it and it's done. We're going to be able to have search. We can search by any field that you create. We're going to be able to show results by any field that you create. We're going to be able to save, add new, download. We'll be able to select on the items and have them display. We'll be able to add pictures. We'll be able to drag and drop anything we want, and we'll be able to create this button set. I'm going to show you all of that step by step, so you won't want to miss this training. If you do like these trainings, go ahead and just click the subscribe button if you haven't already. I love to have you here. I create these trainings as often as I can. Hopefully we're going to get back to every week very soon, but I'm in the middle of creating an incredible course. I am almost finished. It's going to launch in about 2 weeks from now. It is going to help you reach your financial dreams. It is for anybody, not just Excel freelancers, but for any type of freelancer, to help them reach their dreams and goals and financial freedom. It's something that I've been working on for a long time. It's going to go over with 30 years of experience I'm putting into this, so you won't want to miss it. I'm putting everything into it. You won't want to miss the course. All right, great. We're going to get started right on this. If you want this workbook, all you need to do is click the links down below under where it says download, and I'll get you that through either your email or Facebook Messenger. We'll get that sent over to you right away. If you want to support this channel, I've got an incredible 250 pack of templates. That's there for you down there. It's low price. We will get that over sent to you. I'd appreciate that. That supports this channel. All right, so what do we have here? Well, we've got a pretty much a form builder. Let's say we want to clear it out and start from scratch. All we need to do is click this and just say yes. Everything's going to be cleared out. We can turn on or off edit mode if we don't want to do it. If we want to add a text field, all we need to do is drag that text field up here. What it's going to ask us for is a database name. We need to create a database. You can create any database you want. Employees, customers, or you name it, service, cars, whatever you want. Just put it in here. So we'll just let's start out with customers. Let's say we want to create a database. Customer, click OK. Now it's going to say, what is the name of this field, right? Let's say that's our customer name. Okay, so we want to put in a customer name. It's going to drag that customer name. It's going to put it right here. We'll be able to put that in. Now maybe we want a customer type. All we need to do is just drag that over here, and we'll just put in type. Okay, and maybe that type is going to be what kind of customer types do we want? Let's say we want residential, and let's say we want commercial, and we can put that in here. Anything you want in here, comma separated, it's going to automatically do it. We'll just add 2 for now. Those items are automatically going to be available in the drop-down list. Let's say we want a date field. Maybe we're going to say what time do we want, or what day we want to start. We'll call it start date. We can put a date field in there, clicking OK. It's going to add a date field. It's going to automatically be formatted as a date. You see that just automatically. And then maybe we want to put in, let's say, a credit limit for the customer, which is an amount field. So we'll do credit limit. Putting it in there, right there, like that, that's a credit limit. And maybe we want a number field, right? So let's say we want to put in number. Let's say month, day visit, right? Maybe a specific day we want to call it month, day visit. So what day of the month we want to visit them on, and we'll put that on the 5. So that's automatically formatted as a number. Maybe we want to put a picture of the customer here, so we can put a picture here. Then we'll call that picture field, and then clicking OK. And then automatically we've got a folder. We can browse for a picture there. So we can put a picture in. That's going to be only for pictures. So we've picture displayed. And we want to search for this, right? So we're going to drag a search field. We'll put it right up here. That's going to let us search. Now we can search by any type of the field that we just added. We can search on type or start date or anything that we want that we just added. And we want a filter list. We need a list of those customers. So I'm going to drag that up here. And what do I want? I want to display, maybe I want to display by customer name. So it's going to list those customer names up here. So now maybe we certainly need a button set. So I'm going to drag that up here. Okay, we're good. Our form is built, right? I'm going to turn off edit mode. It's off. We can no longer edit it, right? We're good to go. Now what we need to do is just add a name, Fredders, and save it, right? Well, let's do a credit limit of 500. Okay, good. Saving that saves it. So now we see Fredders, the customer save. Fredders is now built. If we add a new customer, let's say Davis, and then we'll give him a picture. We don't need to put in all the information here. And here's David right here, clicking OK, and we'll give him the type of residential. Okay, saving that, boom. That's how we do. That's how fast we can build a form. I want to select Fred, select Davis. Maybe we want to search by a name, customer name. We want to search only Fred. Let's say we want to search by the name of Fred. That's going to put Fred, only those results of Fred. If I want to change this to David, it's going to search only David. Okay, so maybe we want to search by customer type. And we want to search, let's say we want to search by, let's say, commercial, COM, and that's it. That's enough. And it's going to return Fredders. So that's all we have to do. It's an incredible form. I just built that form from scratch in less than a minute or a minute and a half, right? And it's even easier than that. So it's going to be an incredible training. You won't want to miss it. Let's continue on. So what do we want to do? Why don't we start off with this little switch here? This is a toggle switch. And this toggle switch is basically going to show and hide these buttons here. And so to display these buttons, we need to give them a specific name. Just so you know, this database here, here's the database here. This was all built automatically, right, by VBA. In other words, this database did not exist. When I clear it out, it'll be deleted. So this entire database was built by VBA. And the admin is super simple. All we have is just some settings. We'll get into that later, but it's just some basic a default field, a default date format, a default amount, and a default number. So we know what that's it for the amount. So this is going to be very, very simple, but it does get a little complex in the code, but I'm going to walk you through every step. So don't worry. You're going to learn so much about how to create forms, how to work with shapes, how to do filters, how to do advanced filters, how to add pictures, display pictures, button sets, you name it, everything's going to be in this training. So if you want to learn about Excel and how to create forms, this is the training for you. You won't want to miss it because I think I've packed everything into this training. Okay, so continuing on with these buttons. So what we want to do is pretty much loop through all the buttons here. The best way to do that is to give these buttons very specific names. This is called field type 1. This button set. Now this button set, it kind of looks strange to you, right? All this is just a picture. I've taken a picture of some buttons and then I've given some names on that. So that's all that is a picture, right? So if I were to format this picture, and so all I did was just insert a picture that looked like buttons, and then I've given it some text over there. So that's it, all I did to do with that. So if I want to show or hide a bunch of buttons, if I give them a unique name, unlike any other name in the sheet, what I can do is I can loop through all the buttons in the sheet, and then I can call out these specific buttons. So notice this says field type clear. This says field type 1. This says field type 2. This says field type 3. Okay, so they're all the way up until field type 9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through all the buttons. Any button which says field type, I'm going to either show or hide depending upon the status of this. Now, so that's all I have to do as far as here. So that notice how when they're off, they're hidden, and when they're on, they're shown. Now all I've done is create a shape. I've called it edit mode back, and I've created another shape here called edit mode switch. So my idea is just to move this switch from here to here, or from here to here, and then I'm going to change the text. I'm simply going to change the text of this shape. This edit mode back, the text is either on or the text is either off. So it's just simply text inside a shape. That's all I did. Keeping it real simple on that switch. So all I need to do is move to the left and change the color, or move it right and change the color and change the text, and then hide. So that's what we're going to do inside the macro. Then I've tied a macro to this. Either one, whether it's this shape here or this button here, the same macro has been tied to both. So if I go in and I edit those macros, if I click assign macro, you're going to see that it's been assigned to something called edit mode, right? Edit mode. So if I edit that, it's going to take us into the VBA. Okay. So we have just a few. I've got two modules, drag and drop module and form macros. The form macros are going to be associated with save, update, and load. The drag and drop are going to have to do with the drag and drop. So the first thing I want to show you is this edit mode macro right here. What we're going to do is we're going to set move increment as long, because that's going to be the number as we move it to the left or move it to the right. We need to know whether we're moving it which way. The button move as long, it's going to keep track of it. And the field shape, we need to focus on that specific shape that we're moving. Okay, so now what I want to know is I need to differentiate. I need to know what mode we're in, right? Are we turning it off or are we turning it on? Well, how do we know? If it's currently on, if the text of edit mode back, if the text is currently on, we know we're going to turn it off. If the text is off, we're going to turn it on. So that's all we need to do is just check to see what that text is. So if we're focused on the form, this is the form sheet. This is called form, okay? Form, that's the sheet. If form.shapes, edit mode back, the text, frame text, that text within there, if it's off, then we need to turn it on. Else, right, we need to turn it off. Okay, so what are we going to do if it's on? I mean, if we need to turn it on, if it's currently off and we need to turn it on, what do we want to do? Well, the first thing what I want to do is I want to set the shape style, the edit mode switch. I want it turned to gray. How do we know if it's gray? I want to set it to this MSO shapes 77. And I also want to text to the text to on, right? But how do we know? How do we know this is 77? And if we turn it to green, it's going to go to 74. How would I know that? Well, I wouldn't know that offhand, right? So all I need to do is just run a macro to figure that out. So I'm just going to run this macro 1. And all I'm going to do is first I'm just going to click on this shape. I'm going to go into the shape format and I'm going to turn it to gray. And I'm going to turn it back to green. And then I'm going to stop the macro. I'm going to look in the macro right here in the module 1 that just got created. And I'm going to see that it's 74 and 77. So that's how I would know, because I wouldn't know offhand. So that's all we need to do. Remove the module and click no, we don't need to save it. So that's pretty much how I was able to get. So let's put a number of this. Turn to green color. And what are we turning to green color? We're at that edit mode switch, the shape, that little shape called edit mode switch. That is that little shape here called edit mode switch. That's what we're turning to green. So that, and then this is turn to gray color. Turn to gray color, or Grey, depending upon where you're from. And then all we need to do after that is we simply need to change the edit mode back, right? That's that back one. We need to change the text on that from its current state of off to on. That's all we have to do. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a variable called move incorrect. I'm going to set it to 1. And why is that? Because I want it to move it to the right, right? So it's got to be a positive number. If it's currently off, let's take a quick look at that. If it's currently off, what direction do we move it in? We move it to the right. So that's a positive number. If it's currently on, I want to move it to the left. So we need to do a negative number, right? Moving it to the left. So that's all we're going to do when it's set to off. So if it's currently on and we need to turn it to on, we need to move it to the left, to the left. So the move increment must be negative, right? So as we can see right here, right, if it's on, we need to turn it to off. We need to have a negative, right? So it's currently on, and we need to turn it to off. So also what we're going to do is we're going to turn it to gray color with this. That's going to be the shape style of that switch. And we're also going to set the text to off. Okay, great. So that does everything, but it doesn't move the shape, right? So all we did as far as the movement is just set this particular variable to either 1 or -1. Okay, so we're going to turn off application screen update. It's going to make things a little bit faster. Then what we're going to do is we're going to then focus on those shapes. Remember we talked about those shapes, right? We've set a field shape as a shape. So what I want to do is I want to hide or show those shapes. So for each field shape in shapes, that means for each shape inside the sheet, that's this form shape. So for all the shapes in that sheet, we're going to do something. We're going to first check to see if the text of that name contains the word field type, making sure that. So for each name inside that, we're going to check to see if the name contains this string. In string means we're going to checking this name. Does it contain this? If it does, this is going to be greater than 0. And what do we do then? Then what I need to do is all I need to do is know whether we're turning it on or turning it off, right? So are we showing or are we hiding those shapes? Showing or hiding those shapes. What's it going to be based on? Well, we know that if this is off, then we need to simply hide those shapes, right? So if shapes edit mode back text frame equals off, then we're going to hide those shapes. Then visible, the field shape equals false, meaning we're hiding that shape. The shape we're hiding. Else we're going to display it. So MSO equals true. So basically in this loop, all we're doing is hiding or showing the shapes based on the text of this button. That's all we're going to do. Okay, so that runs a loop, that completes the loop, and that hides or shows our shape. The last thing we need to do, so inside the macro, we've changed this text, we've changed the color, we've hide or shown these buttons. All we need to do now is basically move this shape to the left or move it to the right. So we can do that with this. For button move equals 1 to 29. That's just a number based on the width of that shape. Right? Edit shapes left, the left position of that shape, is going to be equal to the left position plus the move increment. So this increment is either negative, and meaning it's going to move to the left, or it's positive, meaning it's going to move to the right. So it's either -1 or +1. If it's +1, it's going to move to the right. The left position +1 is going to move to the right. Negative plus negative plus negative is going to move it to the left. So this loop will move it either left or right. Now we're going to turn on our application screen updating. So then all we have to do is when we click this button, it's either going to move it to the left or to the right, just like that. And it's very, very simple, very easy, very quick macro, simply to show or hide the shape. So when it's off, of course, there's nothing we can do with the board, right? And if if this is something that you want to do, you can set up a user password on this too, so that only certain users could edit it. That's certainly something we could do. Maybe we'll add that inside the Patreon platform. If you're not a member of Patreon, it is we do continued updates on that for every single training. I take your ideas, your feature ideas or fixes, or maybe you want me to focus on something, and I take these trainings and I make an updated video and I make an updated workbook. That's on our Patreon, so I hope you'll join us right there on Patreon. All right, so we understand how we get this edit mode to show or hide. But now what I'd like to do is, how do we drag and drop a field? When I take a field, I select on something, how do I drag and drop it and have that field placed directly on the sheet, right? How is that possible? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to show that's part of the drag and drop macro. Well, the idea is relatively simple. The idea is when I click on a shape, a timer is going to start running. And that timer is going to check to see if it's moved positions. If it has moved a position, however, the position is incorrect, it's going to tell us please drag the shape onto the form field. However, if we've clicked on something and moved it to a correct spot, it's going to determine that spot, and it's going to ask me for a label. What is the label of that? So if I put in this label, like we're going to put in, let's say end date, right? Although we probably have a date on that. So then we're going to then we have a field, right? If I want to remove that field, we can put it here. So the idea is when we click on that timer is going to start running. So that's the first macro. Now there's a macro that's assigned to this. It's going to start running that timer, but it's going to also select on that shape. So when I click on assign macro, we're going to see that it's going to call item select. And so we're going to edit that. Now this one, item select, is the one we have. This one is the one we just been over, edit mode. Okay, so we're going to go drop down here and kind of call it item select. And so basically what I want to do is when I select on an item, I want to track something. I want to know what is the top position of the shape and what is the left position of the shape. If I know that top position and I know that left position and I compare it with the new one and I know that there's been a change, right? So if there's been a change, I can then compare it. So how do we know that? Well, that's where we're going to come. We're going to store that information. So I'm going to unhide columns A and B. And we're going to put it right here. Now in B14, when I make a selection, I want to know some things. I want to know the selected shape number. This is here shape number. The reason it's not showing up here, there it is, field type 2, is because there's a macro running right now. So this is shape number 2. This is shape number 3. That could help us going on. Now I also want to know what type is it, right? Because if it's a drop-down list, something else is going to happen. If it's a text field or if it's a date field, we need to format those fields differently based on that. And I noticed that some of these are different thickness. So let's set that up. I should also put that in the macro because I'd like to have uniform height. That means when they get reset, just in case somebody resets the height, we should make sure that they're all uniform height because that's kind of important. So I'm going to set that up inside the macro. Let's do that right now because I want to make sure that when we show or hide those shapes, I'll do that actually when I walk you through the macro, because there's another macro that's going to automatically set these shapes up and make sure that they're all set because they're not quite, but we'll do that because I want to make sure that they all have the same heights. So the idea is I want to know the text field. I want that information. I want it to display right here in B13. Or if it's a drop-down list, I want that information to be displayed here. So that's very important. So how do we know that? Well, when we make that selection, I also want to know the left position, the top position. Notice as I make the selection, the left position and the top position change. And I also want to know if we're moving it to true or false, right? So that's got to change. Okay, so we're going to get into those. So when we make that selection, some of those things need to change. So the macro that's assigned to that button is called item select, item select. So if we drop this over here just a little bit, we'll be able to see both of those. So the first thing with form, what I want to do is the application caller is the shape, the name of the shape that called it. Remember, anytime you run a macro with application caller, if we try to run it from here, it's going to create an error. And that's simply because there's no shape that called it. There's no shape that called it because we called it from here. We actually have to run that macro directly from a shape. So what's going to go inside B12? B12 is the shape number. How do we know the shape number? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the name of the shape that called it, and I'm simply going to remove the field type. That's going to leave me with the number. We can use the replace command to do that. So we're going to replace field type. We're going to replace it with absolutely nothing, and that's going to extract the shape number. Extract shape number. So we've extracted the shape number, but now what I want to do is I also want to know what type of button it is. How do we know what button type it is? Because that is the text within the button. That's the text that I've set, button text. Okay, or button type, I should say, button type. It is the text, but it's also the type. So what I want to do is I want to place that directly inside B13. Again, this time we're going to take the application caller and we're going to extract the text frame 2, the text range, and the text. All this simply means the text inside the button, and it's going to place it directly in B13. I also want to know the left position of that shape. It's going to say here, this is the left position, and I want to know the top position. The top position is going to go inside B15. So we can, and that's important because the next macro we're going to run is going to let us know whether we've moved it or not. I also want to set B16 to false, right? So anytime we select it, it's going to be set to false. And then if the timer runs out, it's going to go to true. Okay. All right, so continuing on. Now what we want to do is I want to also select the individual shape. Why is that important? Because if I'm going to be dragging and dropping something, I need to actually have that shape selected so that I can actually move it. So this macro will select the shape. It'll simply select the shape that's going to call it. Then we're going to run the macro called item check for move. So every time we select it, that item macro, this macro coming up next called check for move. So we're checking to see if it's been moved. This macro will contain a loop, and that loop looks something like this, and it's going to continue to run for a while until it waits for somebody to move it or not. And if it doesn't, it's going to go back to true. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to run through this macro. So it's the macro that runs, along that. As soon as this stays false, it's going to run. As soon as it goes back to true, it's finished running. So if we increase that count number, it'll run for longer. If we decrease that count number, it'll run for faster. So it's based on that count number, relatively simple. So what do we do inside here? Let's go over some variables. I need to keep track of that count number. Notice it just changed to true. The time ran out. We didn't move anything, so the time ran out and went to true. The count number, I need to keep track of how many we're counting. I need to know the field number. That's here, the selected shape number, field number. Also the database column, right? Where are we going to put it in our database, right? This is a database column. This database got created by VBA. So what column is it going to go? If I add a new field, it's going to go right here. So we need to know what, if I move it, right? If I create a brand new field, date field, and I move that down here, I need to create a brand new, let's call this test field. So that's going to be, I need to know that database column. That new database column is going to go right here. Okay. All right, so continuing on. So that's important, that database column. I need to know the list number. We'll be getting into that as we move through the list. I need to know the old left position, the old top position, the current left position, and the current top position. The old left position is here. The old top position is here. The current is wherever I move it to. That's the current. So we'll be comparing the old position with the current position. And I also want to know the label cell. We need to know the label cell, the credit limit or monthly day. This is the label, so we need to know that. That's the cell, right? The cell, and this is the field cell. And the reason we need to know the label cell is because I've got a default label here. This is just simply a blue box with borders, and this is the default field, right? So it's white. So if I were to change this default, it would also update on the form, so the way you can have it nice and uniform. It's an easy way to format, basically, just copy and paste. Okay, so we need to know that, and so we're going to set those, right? Because every time we have a label or field, just remember those. Okay, so I also want to know the selected shape, right? That's the shape that we're working with. The database worksheet, that's the worksheet for the database. The name of the database as a string, the field type as a string, and the field label, right? This is the field type here. This is a type, date type. This is a amount type. This is a number type. And so this is a drop-down list type. And also we need to know as well the field label is a string. This is the field label, credit limit start date. When I create a brand new field, let's say number field, I need to set the label. That goes in here. This is the label, okay? So that label needs to be converted right here. So we need to know that in a string as well. Okay, so that's it for the variables. As I walk you through it, we're going to dimension, the found position is the range, right? Where is the position that it's been found? If I move it, it's found in some position. I need to focus on that position, okay? So we're going to focus on the form, right? This is the form sheet. On air resume next, the first thing what I want to do is I want to know which shape is selected. The selected shape. We're going to set the selected shape equal to field type and B12. What is that? Remember, every time we select a shape, I have to know what the shape has been selected. So we know that the field type here is always going to be field type plus 5, right? So, or plus whatever's in B12. If it's here, it's going to be field type 4. So I can determine what shape the user has selected simply by combining the word field type and whatever's in B12. We know that that's the selected shape. If it's nothing for any reason, we're just going to exit the sub out. Okay, I also want to put that field number into a variable. Field number here is going to be into a variable. I also want to know the field type. What is that field type? That's B13. Remember, we set that field type. I also want to know the old left position in B14, and I want to know the old top position in B15. We're going to start our count, right? The higher this goes, the longer we wait for a user to move a shape. The shorter it is, the less time we wait. Do events is going to allow us to do something else while this macro is running, right? As long as we use do events, right, we can then do other things while the macro is running. Great. So what I want to do is as soon as B16 goes to true, it's going to end. We need to exit out of the loop and exit. So that means either one of two things is going to happen. One, we are going to run out of time all the way to the pub. Sorry, this macro is long. We're going to run out of time. We're going to set it to true, or we're going to make a change, or some change has been detected, and we're going to set it to true. Okay. I'll walk you every step through this macro. You're going to learn so much. So when you see those long macros, don't worry. I'm going over every step, every single step. So basically, this is as long as B16 is false, the macro is going to continue to loop. It's going to continue to go and go and go. As soon as it goes true, we're exiting out of the loop. So this is going to tell us whether we stay in the loop or not. Okay, we're going to set the top position. Now I need to know, we've already defined the old left position, the old top, but now I need to determine where the user has moved the shape, right? So the top position is the current position of the select top shape, and the left position is the current left position. So if we moved it, right? So now I just need to check a few things. I need to check, has it been moved? If the top position is the same as the top position as it was, if the new position is the same as the old, if the old position is the same as left, then there's nothing to do. So we only need to determine, we only need to know to do something if the top position is the old top position and the new top position are different, or the old left position and the new left position are different. So only need to do something when the shape has moved. So if it has moved, then what I want to do is I want to set if the field number 1 goes to skip check. Why is that? What is field number 1? Well, field number 1 is the button set, right? Here's the button set. So I'm just giving them the ability to move that wherever they want, right? There's no limits on where to move that, but I do want to make sure, because they can put the button set anywhere, but all of these fields have very limits. They can't move this anywhere. So I want to check to make sure that they've moved it to an accurate position, right? Make sure it's somewhere on the screen here, unless it's the button set. And the button set, I have a lot more flexibility. They can move it anywhere they want, and they can change, if they move it to the wrong position, it's kind of easy just to move to another position, right? Just right click it. So that's fine, right? Because they can move that again. It's harder to move these fields. That means if the field number equals 1, skip check. Let's just put that button set. All right. And so what we're going to do is we're going to check, and basically what that's going to do is just go down right here. So what I want to do is I want to see if they've moved it to a correct position, because if they've decided to move it to an incorrect position, we need to tell them, hey, please drag the shape onto the form, and then I need to reset these shapes, okay? So reset and move them back in the correct position. So what we're going to do is if the top position is less than row 3, meaning up here, if they decide to move this up here, right? We know if it's less than 3, we need to let them know to do that. So assuming that it is in the correct top position, it's lower than row 3, but I also want to check, is the top position greater than row 40? I'm just putting it at, it's just some row at 40 down here, right? But we don't have to worry about that. I'll fix that bug. That's just when we select many, that bug is going to come up. Like if you select a whole row, right, that you can get that bug, but it's easy to fix. Let's fix that bug right now before it gets annoying. Here we go. If target dot count large is greater than 1, the user has to select greater than exit sub. That's easy to fix that. If you have that, you see that, nobody, that's on selection change, right? So if I decide to select it, it's not going to come up anymore. Great. So we understand that. Let's go ahead and reset that and back out of there. So back into that. So what we want to do is if it's greater than row 40, that means that, the top position is way too far down below. Then we know that's not good. What about the left position? What if it's left of EE, right? Here's column E. We can denote that E through E. If the left position is less than that, they haven't moved it far enough over to the right. So we know that that's not correct. What about if the left position is greater than column O? So I've put it in column O all the way over here. If it's greater than column O, I also. So basically I want it in a certain window. I've got this zoomed in quite a bit for you guys today, but so basically we want to keep it in this area. When they drag these fields over, I want to keep it in this general area. I want to make sure it is in this general area to keep it there. Okay, so you can do that. And so just to make sure if it's correct, then we're good. Okay, so continuing on. Now that we know it, but what if it's out of bounds, out of that range, what I want to do is I want to let the user know with a message box. And we can simply say, please drag the shape onto the form field. We're going to then run a macro called reset form shapes, and we're going to exit the sub. Okay, so that's it. So that's all we have to do. This is the macro we'll be going over next, reset the form shapes. And that's simply going to line these shapes up again. And we're going to resize these shapes because they're not quite on the same height. Okay, so what I want to do, so now that means if we're exited sub, so that means if we continue on with the macro, that means they have moved the shape and it's also in the correct spot. It's within the window that we're allowing. So now what we want to do is we're going to set B16 to true. Remember, I said this loop is going to run until it's true. So we're stopping the loop and we're going to continue on. So what I want to do is I want to set the database name to whatever's in B2. Now that database, as soon as it gets created, it's going to be put in B2. Of course, I'll show you that macro in a moment, but we're just doing the simple drag and drop now. So that database name is going to be located in B2. But what if it doesn't exist yet? If it doesn't exist, we need to create it, right? So how do we know if it doesn't exist? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this form out. Clearing that out, now we have nothing. Now notice the database is gone, right? We have two sheets, admin and form. I have no database sheet. So if I move a shape onto this sheet, there's no database, right? Notice that B2 is empty, right? B2 is empty. The database has been deleted because we cleared the form and the data. So it says, please enter a name for your database, such as customers, employees, or whatever you like. Okay, so we can just simply enter employee. So now we have a database name, and now we also need to add a label for this. We can just call it name. So now we've entered a name. So now the database is in here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. If we've dragged it over, if B2, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to set database name to B2. That's the database name. Then we're going to set the worksheet to the database worksheet. But what if the database worksheet is nothing, as it was originally, right? When B2 was empty, we dragged something over. We didn't have a database, so we need to create a database. We only need to do that once, right? When the data, now we have the sheet. Notice now we have a sheet. Now we have the name, and now we have the ID in here. So we have the information. VBA created that, and that's what we're going to show. I'm going to show you right now. So now what are we saying? Okay, the database is nothing, means no database. So we'll just put no database. So we have to create it before we move on. We can't add a field without a database associated with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to prompt the user to add a name for the database. So the database name is simply equal to, we're going to use simply input box here. Please enter a name for your database, such as customer. You just read it. You don't need to read it again. So the title is going to be entered in a database. Okay, so what it's going to do, if database name still, even after they've entered that, equals nothing, then what we're going to do is going to reset the form shapes, and I'll go over that with you, and exit the sub, right? Because they didn't enter a database, so we're just going to cancel it. Nothing to do. We're exiting the sub. We're not doing anything. We'll give them another try later on. Okay, assuming that they did enter a database name, I'm going to take whatever that value is in that string and I'm going to place it directly inside B2. That's why that database right there, B2, got entered there. So now what we want to do is I want to create that new sheet. I need to create the database. So we can do this with sheets. I want to add it after sheets form, right after this current sheet. And I want to give it a specific name, and the name is going to be that database name. It's going to add a sheet, add database sheet, and name it. Okay, so we've done that. We've added it and named it with that line of code. I also want to make sure that when we add it, it generally activates this. I don't want that database activated. I want the form. So I'm going to reactivate this sheet because as soon as I add it, it activates the database. I don't want that active. I want this form active. So that's all we have to do there. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to give that database a specific name just for fun, right? A2 is going to take on that database name. So A2 is going to do that right there. So inside the sheet's database name, A2 equals database name. Now we could just as easily do that. We can also set the database name again now that we've added it, right? Notice we don't have a database worksheet. We could set it again. So we could do that as well, but it may not be necessary. So in other words, there's two ways to do it. We can use the sheet's database name, or we can set the database name again like this. Notice how we're going to copy this down here. Now that we have the database name, we could do this, right? Set database worksheet, and we could also do this here too. This database worksheet here, this would work as well. Just taking care of that database like this. So that would work as well. Okay. All right. So now that we have to set the database name, we also want to create the ID named range. Notice this, very important. There's a named range that's associated with this ID, and that we're going to use here. So if we look in the formulas here in the name manager, we see that we have a named range called record ID, RECID, record ID. And we take a look in here, it's based on the employees here, A3. So if we look here in the employees, if you look here inside the employees, we have one here. Now there's no data in here. As soon as we add a name, let's say no, okay. Let's add a name. Let's add a button set real quick, just as simple. And we'll add Fred, single name, and then save it, okay. So now the employee's been saved. So now we have employee number 1. So now if I go into the formulas, name manager, and go here, and we tab over, we see that named range is just for the one. As I add more record IDs, this offset named range here will be automatically added. So what I need to do is I need to add this named range. It's very important because it's going to keep track of all the unique IDs for our employees or for whatever record you have. That's why we call it record ID, not employee ID, because we don't know what it is. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that that's added, that I can add that. So in case there's any already, I need to make sure that it's deleted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that just in case there's any named range already with that name, I need to delete it. I also want to create another named range for the headers, and then we're going to call that fields, and I'll show you that in a moment. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to add it. So basically we're just deleting any named ranges if they exist, because we're going to be creating ones that are exactly the same names. We just don't want to make sure they're non-existent. So we're going to add a named range. So this workbook names, I want it tied to the workbook add. I'm going to give it a name called RECID, or otherwise all known as record ID or RCID. It's going to refer to what? It's offset formula. So now what we're doing is we're creating a named range directly inside VBA, and it's the same as if we were adding a formula. So we're going to use the offset formula, then we're going to use parentheses here, and then database name and the exclamation mark along with the apostrophe here. Then we're going to start it out in A3. I want it on that header row. That header row is here. +1 means we're starting it out one row below the header row. No columns over. We're going to use count A. I want to count A based on the database name. Also A3 all through A99. But remember, this is the header row. I don't want to count the header row, so I want to exclude it. That's why we're going to subtract 1. And we're using just a single column. This is going to create a named range for our record ID. I also want to create another named range. And why is that important? Because I want to create another name range if I need to know the particular name. So here we have one name here, but if I decide to add another record, let's take a look at date field. And let's just say we want to put it here, and we're going to call it hire date. I want to create another named range that includes name and hire date. And this is important for our filtered list. When I create a search field here, I need to know what we're going to be searching by. The ID, the name, or the hire date, right? So this is the named range here. If I look in the data, and the data validation here, we see it's called fields. Now, how do we know it fields? Notice that this particular fields is now over all 3 of these fields. As I add more fields, this will change, okay? So what we need to do is we need to add a named range that's going to cover all the fields. And it's very important because I need to know what we're searching by. If I decide to add a number field here, or any other field, it doesn't matter, right? And I just put shift number. And I want to make sure that when we have that drop-down list, it includes that shift number. So that named range must also now include all 4 of these new. So to do that, we're going to create a brand new named range called fields. That's very important. It's going to refer to what? It's going to use the offset because it's dynamic. That means as we add more fields, as we add more columns, we also want that named range to increase based on the database name. We're starting out in A3. That's the header row. Again, this time what we're doing is we're not going to count any rows down or over, any columns over, but we're going to count how many based on the data all the way from A3 through Z3. This is going to counter, this is the column, right? So basically this is the number of columns we're counting over. I want to know how many number of columns are we counting over. We're going to use count A. However many columns contain text, that's how many columns we're counting over. So this is going to create that named range that I just showed you called fields. So we have two named ranges now, one for record ID and one for fields. That's going to help us because then we have a drop-down list that can contain that. What I want to do is I'll set the database worksheet. Okay, here we've done it again, setting that database to sheets B2. That's simply going to do all we did here is the same thing here. So we don't need this anymore because we've already done it up here. I did it up here, which is fine. And so that we don't need. So continuing on, what I want to do now is I want to set inside A3 that record ID. I want to make sure that that header is there set. That header is going to come right here, record ID right here. Okay, so that's going to set that initial header. Once we have the rest of the headers are basically dependent upon, this is going to be automatic. The rest of the headers are simply dependent on what fields the user is going to add. Okay, continuing on. So that's all of this here. All of this here is only for if it's a new database, right? So as we drag fields over, if it's the first field we're dragging over and we have not yet created a database, all this is going to happen. Everything else happens regardless if it's a new database or an existing database. Continuing on, what I want to do is I want to know, is the user moving over a button set? If they're moving over a button set, we're going to do just this. How do we know if it's a button set? Well, the field type is button set. Remember, we've already set the field type up directly right here in B13. B13 contains our field type. So we know that that's already. Let's go back to the form and take a look at B13. That contains our field type. So what happens if the field type is our button set? So how do we know that? Well, if the field type equals button set, then what are we going to do? Which shapes? We have a shape called record button set. It's this shape set right here. This is either hidden or it's displayed. It's already tied to the macros. The three macros are add new, delete, and save. So this button set is simply hidden, right? When I clear the form data, this button set is hidden. It's there, but it's hidden. When I move this button set over, right, it's simply going to display it and move it wherever. It's going to simply unhide it and move the button set wherever I move. So if I click on here and I want to move the button set up here, it's going to move it up here. So normally it's hidden, but we've already displayed it. So that's all we're going to do is simply we're going to display this button set wherever the user has dragged it over. So if I drag this over here, I want that button set displayed on the right. And I got to click it again here. Okay, so it's going to display it on the right or the left. So it really depends. Wherever the top left of where I move this shape, that's where it's going to be displayed. So take a look here. So with shapes, the button set, we're going to set that top position based on the top position. We're going to set that left position based on the left position. And we're going to make sure that it's visible. That's all we have to do. We're going to run the macro that's going to reset those form shapes. It's going to reset all these shapes on the left just to make sure that they're all lined up, right? Because after we've dragged this over, we need to make sure it's lined up again. Okay, all right, so continuing on, if I right click it, nothing's going to happen. If I single click it, that macro is going to start to run. All right, so continuing on, now that we know how to move the button set, what is up next? Well, taking a look at that, what we want to do is I want to check for a search field. What is that search field? This is the search field. If I clear this out, right, I want to display that search field. If I know it's search field here, and I move that search field up to here, wherever I want to search, I want to give that. So notice it says there's no database. We cleared up the database just because I clicked clear data. So we'll just call it test data. So it's going to add a search field. So now we see search field. Now we have a search field. So what if it's a search field? I want to add search by. I want to add a drop-down list, and I want to add a field that the user can search by. That's going to be the search by field. So what do we have to do for that? Well, first of all, I want to make sure the user only adds one search field. If they decide to add another one, I need to let them know, hey, search field exists. Please clear the form and remove all fields and start again, right? Because they don't, maybe they don't want to do with the search form, so they can just clear it and then they can add a search form. So once they clear it, they can add it, put in their test database name, and then they can put it in. Okay, so basically just one search field per form, because that otherwise it creates issues. So we only want one per form. How do we know? Because when I add a search field, I'm going to take that search field, the cell that it's located on here, and I want to put it directly inside here. So I want to put it in B3. So notice that the search field, whatever the search they're going to search, is located here. So E6, put it here. If B3 is empty, the search field has not been added yet here, so it's not been added yet. As soon as they add it, that whatever search field that is going to be here. So I just put that test in there. So notice that it would change to B3. Notice B3, E6, of course, is the cell where it's located. E6 is the cell where it's located. If B3 is, it does not equal empty, that means it's already exists. Please, search field exists already, just the form you saw. Please, so we're going to reset the form and exit sub. This basically means only one search field per form. Simple, okay? However, what if B3 is empty? If it's empty, then we can continue on and add it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the field cell. This is going to be a range. Field cell is a range here. So if we take a look up here, label cell and field cell are both ranges. So we're going to set the field cell down here. Field cell is equal to the range, the selected shape, top cell address. So what does that mean? So the range is equal to the selected shape, top left cell address. So this is what I want. I want to know what is the field. The field cell is the field. This is going to be our label cell. This is going to be our field cell. So if I take a look at the top left and I determine the address of this, the address is E4. But what if I want the field? This is the field, this is the label. If I want the field, I know it's going to be one row below. How do I get to that? We can use the offset. We know the address of the field. Then we can use the offset. One row below, 0 columns. This is going to be our field. Why is that important? Because I need to format that differently. I need to format this for the user input, and I need to format this as a label so that I know that our label is going to have this here called default label, and our field is going to have this default field. So I need to format them differently. So that's why we need to separate them. So we're going to set that one as our field cell. What about our label cell? Our label cell was set right here. Our label cell is simply the address of it. So if I move something, if I bring this over here and I move it right here, our label cell is going to be whatever the top left cell of that is. So in this case, the top left cell here is G5. So G5 is our label cell. How do we set that into range? The label cell, so label, is going to be the range of the selected shape top left cell address. Top left cell address, right? So that means the top left of this shape, the top left, right? This will be G6. So the top left cell is G6. All right, let's try that again because I got to click on it. So the top, let's do it like this. Top left cell, G6. All right, so we know that it's G6. So that's how we're going to get it in. So we just need that. That's our label cell. And we know that in this case, for the search field, for this field, our field cell is one row below it. As we continue on, if the label cell value does not equal empty, or the label cell offset one row below does not equal empty, basically means that if I try to move this search field on something that's already has a label, if it's taken, that means that we don't want to overlap it on another field. So what we're going to do is I'm going to check to see if the current cell, does it contain a value? The label cell, does it already contain a value? Or what about the one below it? If the one below it already contains a value, I don't want to overlap something else. But I also want to check the 2 rows below too. So 1 row below, 2 rows. Why is that important? Because look at our search contains 3, the current one, 1 below, and 2 below. I want to make sure all of the cells, if I drag the search field here, I want to make sure all these cells are available. So if any one of those 3 cells contain values, then I want to let the user know to move it in a correct spot. So check for occupied cells. So we're checking for the current label cell, 1 below it, or 2 below it. If any one of those, let them know this cell or the cells below are already taken. Please select another column or row. Then we're going to reset the forms and exit the sub out, right? There's nothing we can do if they've overlapped. Okay, but considering that we do have free cells, if they have moved it to a correct cell, I'm going to set B1 to true. That's going to set the search add to true. I just want to make sure we need to differentiate. Again, if the user makes a change to here, I need to differentiate between the change here where they're actually searching for something, or the change where we're just adding this field. So B1 is going to tell us. So I'm going to set B1 to true and let VBA know that we're actually adding this field and don't make any changes. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to set that to true. We're going to set the label cell value to search by, right? We need to set that label to search by. That's going to be the value. And then I also want to set the field cell as our default called record ID. So that's going to be our default cell right here. So we need it here. So RECID is going to be our default cell. And continuing on. So what I want to do is I want to make sure this is blank. So next up, what I want to do is set the formats. So how do we know the formats? I want to give this a very specific format. If I wanted to change that format, let's say if I decide, let's say I want to change that format cell. I want to change that format a little bit. And I'm going to go with fill, and let's say fill effects. And let's say we want to do something a little bit different, go from light to dark or something, and then maybe vertical. I don't know why we'd want, probably wouldn't want to do that. But at least you can see now, if I decide to add in a field, that label is going to look a little bit different here. So you can see, so now we see that that label got changed, right? So it gives it kind of a nice look. So we want to make sure that our label is set here automatically. So we're going to set this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this particular cell. This cell is already a named range called default label. This cell is already a default called default field. So I simply copy the default label and I paste it directly inside here, pasting the formats, only those formats, because we've already set the values. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take it's from the admin. We're going to take that default label. We're going to copy it. We're going to take the label cell and we're going to paste special. And we're going to paste those formats. And I also want it horizontally aligned in the center just to make sure that it is centered. So we're going to align that in the center. Okay, next up, I'm going to take that default field. Remember the default field, that white field with the black font. I'm going to copy that. This one needs to be copied and it needs to be pasted here and here in both places. So we're going to do that just now. So the field cell, paste special, paste the formats, pasting that drop-down list, okay? Also, I need to paste one below it. The field cell, one below, one row below, 0 columns left or right, paste special, paste formats. So we're going to paste in the drop-down list. The drop-down list needs that format, and also the search field needs the format. So both of those formats get that field format. Okay, continuing on, what else do I want to do? Now what I want to set some validation, right? This here needs a drop-down list. And what is that drop-down list? It is going to be based on our fields. Remember that data validation is going to be based on those fields, which is all that named range that goes horizontally, all of the fields, and of course it grows as we add more fields. So that's also going to get it automatically. Should have added some fields that make a little more sense, but we can easily remove them just by clicking them and removing them here. So very, very simple. Continuing on, let's go ahead and change this back so we get some nice form. But I wanted you to be able to see that, how we can simply change those back to change those field labels. Continuing on. Okay, so we need to add that named range here, fields to that. So to do that, we're going to make sure, now normally we always delete it, but this is a brand new form so we don't have to delete it. But normally, anytime you add a validation, you should do field cell validation delete, but there's no way that that would be there before. But normally, if you're changing a validation, you must delete the other one first, but this is always a blank cell. Field cell validation, we're adding it. We're going to add alert style, valid alert stop. We want a formula that's going to be that named range fields. So that's going to set it up to have all those headers. Then what I want to do is the database worksheet AA1 formula. I want to set a specific formula. Why is that? Because when the user makes a change, I want to know if we're going to run an advanced filter. And let's say let's add some nice fields so we can see that some more. So let's add name here, and then we'll add type here, and we'll set some drop-down lists here. Type here so we have some fields to work with, right? If we're going to run this, let's say tech and office, we want to make sure that we're going to be able to filter based on by name or search based on type, right? So what I want to do is inside the database, all the way over here, way out of the way, I want to make sure that we're going to run our advanced filter based on type or based on name. So what I want to make sure is AA1 equals whatever's in E5, right? So as we add the type, the user will then filter it. We're going to put whatever the user filters by type, we're going to put it in 2. So this is going to be our criteria for our advanced filter. So the header is dynamic, right? So whatever the user types in here, name is going to appear right in here. To do that, we could just set up a formula called equals form E5. So we're putting that formula using VBA right here. So here is our criteria header. So to do that, database worksheet A1 equals form and whatever the field cell address. Whatever the field cell, this is our field, this is our label, this is our field address. Whatever the address of this is, we're simply going to place it. That address is E5. So we're placing that. That's going to set that criteria header formula. Okay, so that's for our criteria header. Next up, what I want to set the search field. B3 is going to have to take, remember I said when we add a search field, I want to know what is located, what that search field is here. I want it, here's the label, here's the field, but I wanted the actual search field, the one the user is going to be searching. Because when I make a change to this, I need to know what cell we're making a change to. If I search by name, I want to know. So I want E6, that's going to be the label, the field, but one below the field. I want to put that address and I want to put it directly in B3. So to do that, B3 is simply equal to the field cell. This is our field cell here. This is our label. One below the field cell. So to do that, we're going to use offset. One row below, 0 row columns. I want to set the address there. That's going to set the search field directly in here. Now that we know the search field, I'm going to again return back the search back to false, right? We set it to true up here. I want to set it back to true. So we set it to true here. I'm going to set it back to false right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to reset the form shades and exit the sub. Remember, all of this is only simply for adding the search field. Okay, well, what's next? What if we add a filtered list? When we add a filtered list, that means I want a list of all those names, and I want to put that, let's say, right here. This is our database name, so that's why it's showing kind of weird. It's just a test. I should probably, let's clear that and add some data that makes sense, okay? So it's good to see it again. So all we need to do, again, let's add a text field. This just shows you how fast it is. We're going to add our database name. Let's put employees, something that makes a little more sense. Then what we're going to do is add a field name. So that's the employee name. Then I'm going to add the search field here. We'll put that up here just as you saw that. Now we're ready to add the field list. So we take a look at the field list. I'm going to put it right here. Now we see we have employee results. So it makes a little more sense because our database name. So what I want to do is I want to take our database name and I want to put the word results. Then we're going to search simply by what do we want to display here in the results. I want to probably display names, right? So I want all the employee names here. But if you want to display something else, maybe you want to display by type, but I don't know why you would. Probably going to be your name. Generally, it's going to be name. So you can differentiate, but you might want to search by ID or something like that. It's possible, but name. So this is what's going to be displayed here. So that's what I want here. So what we're going to do in this case, if the field type equals filtered list, we need to do some things. What do I need to do? I need to add a label here. I need to add a drop-down list here. Same thing just like we did here. Same drop-down list, okay? So that's what we're going to do here. So if range B4, then the filtered list exists. That filtered list here, I'm going to put directly inside B4. Notice E8 is the address, the cell that we're going to be adding that filter. And I want that address to look right here in B4. Once it gets added, that cell address is going to go into B4. So if B4 does not equal empty, then we know the filtered list exists. If I try to add another one, I only want one single list per form. It says filtered list already exists. Please clear the form to remove all fields and start again. That means if you want to change it. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to reset and exit this up. Only one filtered list per form. We're going to say, just as we did before, B1 is going to go to true. When I make a change here, I want something to happen, but not the kind of change when I'm adding this field. So we need to differentiate between those two types of changes. I'm going to set the field cell. What is that field cell? This is our field. This is our label. Field and label. So we're going to set that field cell is equal to the label cell plus one row below. This is going to set our field cell. And again, we're going to take our label, our admin label, and we're going to copy that because I want to set that format to the employee results. So our label is going to take on right here. We're copying our default label from the admin, and we're pasting it inside that label cell, paste special. We're pasting that label, those formats. Then I want to set a specific name, right? I want to set specific tests. What is it? It's going to be that database name plus the word results. So we're going to take that database name and a space and the results, and we're setting the text for that cell, that filtered text. I also want it horizontally aligned in the center. Next up, I want to set that field. The formats then have to be done for the field. So how are we going to do that? We're going to set here. We're going to copy that default field from our admin screen. We're going to paste that special based on the field cell and pasting those formats for the drop-down list. We don't need this one. We've already covered that. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be adding in some additional information. We're going to be adding in that validation. Just like we did here, we need a drop-down list. Just like we did here, I also want to add it. So our field cell is going to take care of that drop-down list. Field cell, validation, add, we're adding a drop-down list. Validate, list type, stop, meaning it must be required. Formula equals simply fields, just as exactly as we did all the way up here. So now what we're doing is we want to set that initial ID. That initial ID, just so it shows something is received. We're going to set it because this is the one that's all going to be in every database. So we want to make sure to set that as our default. So we're setting the text in there as the default right here. And it's simply going to be the field cell value equals record ID. It's going to set that initial value. Got issues with that word. Okay, next up, what I want to do is I want to copy conditional formatting. Why is this important? Because as names get added, I want some nice conditional formatting to be here. So notice how it's nice. But when we clear our form, everything gets cleared, including conditional formatting. So if I want to add conditional formatting through VBA, it's very difficult, very complicated through VBA. But you know what's even better? All we need to do is just set that conditional formatting somewhere else on your form and then copy it. So I've done that right here. But also, I want to put the ID. Let's say we have names here. Let's say I have all their names, right? But I want to put the ID here. So let's say we add Fred. Let's put a button set here first. Why don't we? And let's say we add Fred. Let's show you here. You know, where Fred's got to make it in every video. Fred would cry. Okay, so what we're going to do is let's add one more field. Why we're not? Let's add a date field so we can get some kind of data. Higher date. Okay, so now that we have that, right, we want to set it up. We're setting it up. So what I want those names to appear here. So we're going to save it. Now notice that Fred Fredder's got Fred Fredder's here. But I also want the ID, and that ID is going to be right here. Notice there's a 1 here, but you can't see. Why can't we see the ID here? We can see it up here, but why can't we see it here? Well, it's hidden. And it's hidden using a custom formatting. If I set that to general, you're going to see it. So what I want to do is I want to set this to some special format so that you can't see the ID. And I want to set this to some special format. And I want to copy those formats all the way down. So the best way to do that is to have this type of format somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't get cleared. And I've put it right here. You see this A10 and B10. Let's take a look in the custom format. All we need to do is go into more number formats, and you see it's 2 semicolons. If it's numbers, 2 semicolons is to hide it. If it's text and numbers, we use 3 semicolons. The idea is that it's going to hide the values. So that means if we take a look in this one here, the one that we didn't change, looking here, see it's a custom format. If we go in here, and so it's the 2 semicolons. So what I've done through VBA is I've taken this cell here and I've copied it all the way down here. And of course, it's got the blue background. So I've copied the formats all the way down here. So that's going to copy those formats. It's going to be hidden. Right? It's the same thing if I do this, copy, and then paste special, and then paste those formats in. See, it's the same thing. The number's still here, but I've pasted the formats in. This is the one that contains the conditional formatting. So basically all I need to do is copy both of these and paste them both here. So this is the one. Let's take a look in the conditional formatting here. Conditional formatting, manage rules. We take a look, we see 3 rules here. The first rule is going to be based on the selected cell. B8 does not equal empty, and B8 equals row. So B8 is always going to be our selected row. Notice it's 9, right? So if we add one more, we can alternate between them. Let's save that. Let's add a new. Okay, let's add a new one. Let's call it David, and then we'll save it. So now we've got 2. So now when I see David, so notice how B8 changes to 10. Notice how B8 also changes to 9. So whatever selected cell is going to be there, the conditional format is going to be based on this row here. So within VBA, all I need to do is whatever the selected row is, place it directly inside B8, and we'll get to that. So when I add the conditional formatting here and I copy this conditional formatting and I bring it down here, whatever rules are here get pasted here. Now that's much easier than doing it through VBA. I mean, copy and paste it through VBA, but for adding new rules, very, very complicated. I've never done that. Had no need to do that because it's much easier doing it this way. So all we need to do is put some rules here and then copy and paste them. So here the rule is B10. So I want to copy odd rows and give it a white background. I want to copy even rows and give it a light blue background. So that's just what I've done here. Just making sure that B10 contains a value and the even rows get the light blue background. The odd rows get the white background. So now as we add data here, right, automatically it's going to be conditional formatting. So it's very simple. So In VBA, all I'm going to do is copy and paste this, starting here, right here, and going all the way down. So that's the next lines of code. So here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take A10 through B10, and we're going to copy the conditional formatting, copy the format and conditional. Let's do format and conditional formatting, because A10 is just the hidden format. B10 is the conditional formatting. So continuing on, now what are we going to play? Where are we going to paste this? We're going to paste it here, starting with the first cell. What is this? Well, this is basically the field cell, one row down from that. So we just need to move one row down from the field. So the range is the cells, and the field cell row, that row, this is our field cell row right here. But I want it one row below, so one row below is here. And then continuing on. So now as we add those, let's take a look at this. Double click, there we go. Now we got both of them. So what I want to do is one row down. So this is going to be our first one. And where's it going to go to? What about our column? Our column is going to start based on our field cell column. Here's our field cell column here. But I want to go one column over to the left. So that's going to be the field cell column -1. So this is our starting point. Where's the end of our range? The end of our range is based on the field cell row plus 100. I'm going to do just 100 rows, and our field cell column. So we're going to take this entire range here, and I'm going to paste special and paste formats. That's going to paste both of those formats, both the hidden range here, the hidden number here, and the conditional formatting here, so that as I add values, they're automatically going to be. So this way we can clear out everything. I can clear using the clear. In VBA, we're using the clear, which clears everything, all the conditional formatting, everything at all, and it automatically adds it back again. So that's how we can do it using this here. Great. So now that we understand how to apply that conditional formatting, because that's important, I want to set the search field address. Remember, I need to make sure that gets added here so I know which cell we're basing the filters on. If I make a change that, I need to know that we need to show up those IDs here. Or if I want to show the higher dates, I want to show the higher dates here. So whatever I'm changing, I want it to show here. So I want to make sure that I know what cell to change. That cell is going to go directly in B4. So we need to know that E8 is our filter, and it's going to go directly inside B4. That's what we're going to do right here. B4 is simply equal to the field cell, the address. So that's setting that search field. All right, now what I want to do is I want to add the filter. Just as we did before, we're setting this to true here, filter type to true, and then back to false here just to make sure. And we're going to reset those shapes. So that's the filtered list. So far we've been over how to add the search ID, how to add the filter list. So we know how to add both of those. Continuing on. Okay, so now what we're going to do is for every other field, not this and not these, but for every other field, our field address is always one over to the right, meaning we have our field here and our label. So our label's set. Our label's already been set. Where did we set the label? We set the label way up here, right here. So this is our label. But what about our field? It's going to be one right. For everything else, for every other type of field, it's always going to be on the right. So how do we know that? Well, we're going to set the field cell. It's going to be based on the selected shape, the top left cell, that address. This is our field. Plus, we're going to offset it one column to the right. Set our field cell. So this is going to set the field cell. And so we know it's one to the right for everything else. So for everything else. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to check if the user has decided they're going to position, right? We can't allow this to happen, right? They can't put it over. We say, hey, you have to put it in a blank cell. So I want to check, is this available or is this hidden? If they move it to here, that's not going to work either, right? So we need to make sure they put it in a blank cell. So I want to check, is this cell blank? Is this cell blank? If both of those are blank, okay. But if either one of these has a value, right, make sure that we're going to check it. Okay, so how do we know that? I also want to make sure that if we're moving, even if it's blank, let's say the user moves it to a blank cell. Let's go ahead and I want to clear this out. And I also want to move this. So even if it's blank and they try to move it here, we're going to check to make sure because the cell one over to the right isn't blank. So we're going to check that just to make sure that they're moving it to the right spot. If the label cell, so we're going to say check if position over another field. If the label cell does not equal empty, or the label cell offset, meaning the one to the left. So once again, if the label cell value does not equal empty, or the one to the left of the label cell does not equal empty, or the one to the right does not equal empty, then we need to let the user know. We just need to make sure that the cells to the left, the current cell, and the one to the right are all empty, just to make sure they're moving it to the right cell. This cell, or an adjacent cell, is already taken. Please select another column or row. Reset the form states and exit, meaning they haven't moved it to the right space. Assuming that they have moved it, we can then set the field label to the input box. Remember, now we need to prompt them to put the label in. If they add a field and they move it to the right spot, we say, okay, let's get an input box and put the correct field. So we need to put it in. So we need to prompt them with an input box. Input box, please enter a label for this field type, right? And the field type, whatever the field type is. So that means if the field type is date or amount or whatever, the field label name, okay? Then if the field label is nothing, meaning they have canceled or they've closed it out and they haven't put in any label, we are going to simply reset the shape, which simply reset this list and exit the sub out. If they have put in a label in, we're going to do something. We're going to take, again, our default label. I need to copy that default directly from the admin, which is located right here. And I need to paste it inside the label, setting that format up. So we could do that, label paste the formats on our label cell. And next up, I want to set the value of that. So what is the value of that label? Well, it's based on the field value. That is the variable that the user entered when they entered that input box here. That is the label that they've given it. So we'll just put that as the field label. So now that we have that, what I want to do is I want to set the field. Remember, the field has to be that white field. We're going to take that from our admin. We're going to copy that default field. We're going to paste that into the field, pasting those formats, that white color. I want to set the database. Now that I've created a brand new field, such as date, I want to take it in our database. I need to make sure to add that column in. Not only do I need to add the name here located in row 3, but I need to add what cell it's on. I'm going to use that for data mapping a little bit later on. And whatever cell that's been placed on, I need to put that in the first row. So we can do that with the following lines of code. So the database column is going to be the first available database column. We can use the database worksheet, starting with range Z3 all the way over on the right, and XL to the left column +1. So what that's going to do is going to find the first column with a value. It would be here, +1 would be here. So that's going to give us the column. Let's put it into a long variable. That's going to be our column of our database. Now we're ready to set that database value. It's going to be based on that field label. So our database worksheet, row 3, our database column, that value is going to equal that label value. I also want to put the address, that address of that cell is going to be the database worksheet. We want it in row 1 of our database, the database column. That value is going to be equal to that field cell in the address. Set the address for data mapping right here. I want to set then a field cell name. What is that name of that field cell? That field cell name is going to be called form field and the database column. What does that mean? That means this label, this name right here, this is the name up here in the upper left-hand corner called form field 4. I want to keep track of it. Not only do I want to keep track, I want to keep track of what it is. We're going to call it form field 4. Why 4? Because it's the 4th column in our database. That way I know exactly where it's located. I know exactly what column. If I have to move them over or if I have to delete this one, I'm going to change this to 3. How does that work? Notice if higher date is form field 3, but I remove that, I need to make sure that date now changes to 3, form field 3. So now it's now the 3rd column. So we deleted that other column, we moved it over so we can keep track. That way I always know what column this is located on. All I need to do is remove the word form field and I know exactly what column the database is on. So continuing on, that's why we're setting the name of that cell. So remember, cells can store data. Not only can a cell store the data that's in the cell, but we can use the name of the cell to store data as well. So we have 2 ways to store data in any cell, at least 2, there might be some more. So now what I want to do is I want to make some differentiations based on whether it's a drop-down list, a date field, amount, number field, picture field, and so on and so forth. So we're going to use select case based on that field type. What type of field? Remember, the field type is either drop-down, date field, amount field, or whatever, okay? So what if it's a drop-down list? Well, if it's a drop-down list, what I want to do is I want to set the name of that value to the label cell value. What does that mean? The drop-down list name dot value is equal to label cell value. That's the name of, and I'm going to show you exactly what that drop down is a form. Let's take a look at that form. It's this simple form here called drop down. And I have 2 fields in that. I have one, let's hit the properties. It's called list name. This is the list name. I have another field called list items. So what I want to do is I want to set the default. I want to show this form and I want to set the default field to whatever is in this name. So let's take a look back in here. So the name, the value that goes inside this box is going to be what? The value is going to be the label cell value. So that means if it's a drop-down field, if I decide to add a drop-down field, and I set this to drop, let's do something easier, type, like let's do employee type. So now when I launch that drop-down list, I want to make sure employee type is set here. That kind of got moved over, didn't it? I want to set it here. Okay, so that's what is setting that default. So we don't need to save that, clicking OK. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that it's automatically set based on that default. Let's move that back over here. And so to do that, all we have to do is just set the value of that based on the label value. That label value we have already set inside this, the label cell value. So we're just going to set that default. Once we have that, I want to show that drop-down form. When I add a drop-down list here, I want to show it. We're going to, let's see, do type again. I want to display that so we can enter the items. We're going to show that. And now we go item 1, item 2, and item 3. These names then become part of the list. So we show that. So now we have item 1, item 2, and item 3 inside that list. Okay, so once we do that, we're going to set the list number. Now I need to know what list number. How do we know that? Because we don't know how many drop-down lists the user is going to create. What I want to do is I want to store that list. This list, item 1, item 2, must be stored somewhere. It's part of the database, so why don't we store it on the database? Why don't we store it all the way over here, starting with rows BA, right? So list 1, BA1, item 1, item 2, item 3. Notice it's been started here. So how do we know that? Well, the best thing we can do is create a list somewhere in the database, somewhere off, way off. So we're going to do just that. So I'm going to determine what, now if I add another one, it should be in BB, right? So let's take a look. Let's add one more, because this one we didn't add any database there. We didn't add one there. So here we have one here, and let's add one more here. So we're going to add a drop-down list here, and we can just put color here, and we'll put black, blue, red. Okay, so now we have a drop-down list here, and I want that one to appear directly here. So we want to keep track of these lists. This is list 1, this is list 2. I want to put them in the database. So the best way to do that is determine what column is available. If I start here and there's no data, I'll put it here. If I look for the first available column, so the third one would go here, obviously. So to do that, what we're going to use, you can use application worksheet function count A, using so many great formulas here. And I'm going to count everything from BA1 to BZ1. So basically, we're just counting. Right? If I count 2 here, I know the third one's going to go here. So all we need to do is just start it on here. So we notice this is column. Let's take a look at this column. Column 53, right? So if this is column 53, we know that we are going to, I put a negative there first. This is going to go to 54. So if I count 0, I'm going to put it in 0 plus 53. If I count 2, I'm going to put it there. So that's all we're going to be doing, is just adding that. So we're going to set that list number. What is the list number? It's going to be here. That's how many lists are contained, right? Right now we have 2 lists. So this would be list number, would be 2. So where would the next one be? It would be right here. So if I want to place that list here, the field cell validation, we're going to add it. How do we know it? The field cell add validation. I want to add. Why are we adding it? We need to add a validation here. What are we going to call this? If I look in the named range, we go into the data validation here, and we go into the name range. We're going to see this called field list 2. It was the second one that's added, field list 2. If I add another one, it's going to be field list 3. So we need to keep different track. This is obviously field list 1. So we can keep track of them just by giving them different names. So to do that, we're simply going to use the list number, creating a brand new named range here called list number 1. So field list is equal to that named range. So that's the named range that we're going to be adding. Field list validation, adding a field list number. Now you may be thinking, okay, that's great. That's how we add the name, but how do we create this named range? So let's go ahead and see how we actually create this named range. So we're going to go back into this form right here. We're going to view the object, right? We see, so we only have one button. Okay, so what happens when we click that button? Well, it's called click OK button. So there's some macro that runs here. So we need to basically create that named range with this macro. We're going to set the list number as long, the list column as long, the item number as long, and the list row as long. So because we need to add all that. So what this macro is going to do is do a few things. It's going to determine what column. It's going to determine the name. It's going to then determine the items, and it's going to add a named range based on that. So if I look in the name manager and I see a named range called, let's take a look at item list here field list one, yeah, sorry. This one, field list one, you see it's a named range based on this. So it's a count, we're counting A, based on the offset formula. We're simply going to add a named range. So the list would be 2. So this macro is going to do 2 things. It's going to take all the items that the user has entered, it's going to put them here. Then it's going to create a named range, a dynamic named range for these items, or dynamic named range for these items. It is this dynamic named range, this data range that we're going to use inside our data validation. So we're going to do a few things with that. Let's take a look inside the code back here. So we need the item number in the list row. I also need the sheet name for the database and the list items as a string. This is going to be an array because we need to loop through all the items that the user has entered. I believe inside our Patreon platform, I'm going to add additional features so that we can add, edit, and update that list as well. Okay, so first of all, if the drop-down list item value equals empty, then you have not added any list items. What does that mean? Well, if we take a look inside the view, the object, we need to see that this is called list items. This field's called list items. What I want to know is if this is empty, then we need to let the user know to add some items, because if they're trying to save it without any items, that might not be good. So we're going to do just that simply by letting the user know that this, if it's empty, the value of the field's empty, let the user know, do you want to continue missing items? If it's no, then we're going to exit the sub. We're going to set that database sheet. We know that's located in B2 of our forms, that database sheet name. That's important because we're going to need to know where to save it. And the list column, where are we going to find the list column? I need to know the first available column starting back with BZ. So the first available column, we can use and XL to the left to do that. So the last possible column is BZ1. So I want to know the first column with a value plus 1. That means the first available column. So basically it's going to start with BZ. It's going to look all the way back here, finding the first one with the value. So there it's going to say BB is the 1 and XL to the left. Plus 1 is going to be there. So our first available column is going to be here. So that's going to set that column number. We're knowing what that first available column, that's going to be our listed column for the next list. If the list column for any reason is less than 53, then set it to 53, right? I want this is our first one. BA is also 53. So that's going to set for our first list, it's going to set that minimum column number. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to set the list number equal to list column minus 52. So I want the list, meaning basically if the column is 53, I want the list number to be 1. If the column is 54, I want it to be 2. So this is going to set our list number to 1, 2, 3 based on the column. Because so we have list column and we have list number, 2 different variables. That's important because this is going to be list 1, list 2. Continuing on. This workbook, we're going to create a named range here. And we want that named range to be the word field list and the list number. If you go into the formulas, name manager, we see those two, field list 1, field list 2. So we want to create the named range. And we're going to add that offset formula based on the location of that. We're adding that offset based on this location or based on this location for however many data there are. So to do that, we're going to say this formula, the list number. So here's the name of that we're creating that named range. What does it refer to? This is the offset formula. It's going to be offset based on the database name plus the sheets and the database name plus what is the first cell? It's going to be row 1 and the list column. So this is the address. This is the address of the first cell. This is where it starts. Okay, we're going to use, I don't want to start in row 1. I actually want to go 1 row down. So we're going to go here. We do that because if there's no data, it won't create an error. So we start in row 1, but we then move 1 row down using here. No columns over. We're going to count A. How many are we counting? We're going to based on the database sheet. This based on this list column. I want to know how many between this column 1, row 1, and this column between all the way down. Let's see if we could do 99 in case they have 100 different items and the list column. So basically we're just simply going to count the number using count A of all the items. And it's the same formula, address and 1 minus 1 because I don't want that top row plus 1. So all that this formula does, all this is simply going to do this. Simply going to create this formula located right here. Simply creating this formula right here. Okay, that's all we're doing this form. So that's how we get that formula. So we get the named range. So it's going to be based on that column. Once we have done that, I want to set the name. I want to put that name. I want to put it right here. List 1 or list 2. That's just for informational. So we're going to put that in row 1. So right here, sheet, the database sheet, row 1, the list column, the value is simply the list and the list number, setting that list name. That way it helps us keep track. I want to know the list items. Now what we want to do is we want to take all the items that the user has entered. Let's just take a quick look inside this form once more so I can show you what those would be. If I were to double click and then run this, now the list items are here, test 1, test 2, and test 3. So what I need to do, comma separate, is I need to split all these, and I need to create an array so that we can loop through all of these and then add each one of these individually to the cells down here. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to do that using the split. So here, so the list items is simply going to be the split. We're splitting the drop-down list items here, and we're going to split them by whatever the comma is. So what this is going to do is going to create an array separated by that comma. What we're then going to do is loop through all the items in this array and add them in there. So we're starting out at list 2. Why 2? Because I want to start out in row 2. I want to add that. I want to increase the row number as we move down. So the list row is equal to 2. So the item number is going to be 0 because we're dealing with an array. The first item in an array is always 0. Going to the upper bound, however many items there are. List items, however many. If there's 3 items, this is going to be list items. This is going to be 2. 0 to 2 is going to be 3 items, okay? So I also want to know, so now the sheets, the database sheet, the cell, the list row, the list column, list row starts at 2, list column value equals the list items and the item number. This is going to set that first number. So the item number is going to go from 0, 1, 2, 3, however many you have in there. All I need to do is increment the list row one more, right? As we move down, the list goes from 2 to 3 to 4, adding each individual item in the list. So that's how we take comma separated text and add them to individual rows. We just move down there. Then we clear the form out and we hide the form. Once we hide the form, we're going to go down here. So now, remember, we've shown the form here in this macro. Once we show the form, the user enters all the information, it creates that named range list. And now you see, now that that named range has been created, now you understand why we can set the data validation for this field list and the list number, because that list now exists as soon as we close the form out, right? It automatically showed. Okay, continuing on. Now that we've created that named range on the field cell, so basically all that does is create that named range right here and create that drop down list right here on our cell. We create the name list. Okay, so continuing on. What if it's a date field? Well, if it's a date field, I pretty much need to copy this. So I've got our date field right here. Look, it's called date field. I just need to copy that format and bring it directly in and paste it directly into the date field, whatever it is. So we're going to do just that. So the field number format, the field format is equal to the format of the number format. Format to format is another great way of just doing it. We can use copy and paste, or we can just use number format to number format. This number format is simply equal to this number format. Okay, taken from, what if it's an amount field? We're doing exactly the same thing. The field cell, the number format is simply equal to the amount field. The key is to use your named ranges here, amount field, number field here. So here, we've created these named ranges. So here is called date field, here is called amount field, and here is called number field. So it's very easy once we then name those ranges. So that's all we need to do. What if it's a picture field? So here we've already worked with date, number, and field. So if it's a picture field, I want to do a few things. First thing what I want to do is I want to delete any field cell that's been named. And that means just in case the current cell has any name, we're going to delete it just to make sure. We're going to give it a specific name, right? The reason we need to do this is because we've already named it for everything else, but I want to give the picture field a very distinct name. Why is that? Notice this name has form field 4, form field 3, form field 5, right? But what about a picture field? A picture field, I want it very different. Why do I want a picture field different? Okay, let's just call this picture. Picture. Okay, so a picture is different. Why do I want it different? Because when it's a picture field, I want to display this little folder here. So if I select here, I don't want to display a folder here. I only want to display it if I did here. So how can I differentiate between those two fields? Well, if the name of the form is called form picture 7, right, or something like that, and this is called form field, I can differentiate between these two types of fields based on the name of the field. So using that differentiation, I know whether to place a folder or not. And if I place a folder, we know to browse for a picture. Okay, so it's going to take that active cell. So that's why we're differentiating between this name. That's why I'm deleting whatever name's been associated, and I'm giving it that very specific name, form picture, and the database column. The reason I'm not giving it the same name is because maybe we're going to add more than one picture. If we add more than one picture, we need to differentiate between those two picture fields. So pic 2 is going to have a very different field. So this is going to be called form picture 8. Now the 8 signifies the database column. the 7 Dignify. So they're different names. So that way, see, no matter what I send, if I added a different picture, that way we can add more than one picture here very, very easily. So we can add additional pictures. So we want to do that. Okay, and I'll show you how we get that, of course, folder to show up. Okay, so we're setting that field name basically very specific based on because the picture field and the database column. Then all we need to do is reset the form shape. So resetting the form shapes here, that's going to be the next macro we'll go over. And then we're going to loop through that. So that's it. So we're just going to keep looping until the user does something. We're going to set B16, we don't need to set this. I was thinking about selecting B16 to true. That's going to stop the loop. Once the timer runs out, this goes to true, and turn on application screen updating to true, just in case it's not. And then that's it. That's all we pretty much have to do with the drag and drop. Okay, so that covers the drag and drop, but I wanted to cover this particular one that called reset the shapes. We've been looking at it and going over it, but I want to cover that macro. That macro is right here called reset form shapes. I also want to set the height of these shapes too. So that's important. So I'm going to set, so let's go through it here. So the field number is long. I'm going to go through each of the fields. The left position and the top position, because I need to position those. If we move these out of the way for some reason here, I need to make sure that we reposition. Remember, right-clicking, I should fix that. Right-clicking doesn't change that. How right-clicking doesn't do anything, a single click will select it. Sometimes I right-click. So what I want to do is I want to line this up. I also want to make sure, I should probably set the widths. Notice the widths and the heights all should be the same, right? So we should making sure that way if the user accidentally changes the height, it's automatically going to get reset automatically. So we want to do that. We want everything to be uniform and looking beautiful. We're going to do that. So left position, I'm going to set the initial left position to be based on C here, 1, all the 1, and then plus we're going to add another. So it's going to be row 1 plus the left position, the left position plus 4. I don't want it exactly on the left. I want it moved over a little bit. The top position, that's what's going to be based on row 2 plus 10, right? Here's row 2. I want to add a little bit below that. That's where our top button set's going to go to. So for field number, because 1 through 9, why are we using 1? Because we have 9 different, this one doesn't move. So we're going to use this all the way with 9 different buttons. So we're going to set the field number 1 through 9, the shapes of field number, and the field number. This note the shape, field type 1, 2, 3. The left position is based on left position, the top positions, and then we can probably set the height. We can do something like width, change this around a little bit to make it a little bit easier. So we could do something like width, shapes field number, and then we can just set the left. It's a little bit easier, a little bit more concise code. The left position is going to be, let's set here. The left position is going to be here. The top position is going to be here. We can get rid of that. And I want to set the width and the height. Now we can get rid of that here. We don't need this. We do need to end with. And we're going to set the height and the width. So dot height, I'm going to guess on this, probably about equals point, let's say 20 or 30 maybe. And then the width is equal to maybe 230. So let's run this and see where we are on the height. Oh, the height's way too big. 20, and then reset that. Could use a little bit bigger than that, maybe 23. Okay, so I like that, and let's check the width now. Move that over here. Whoa, it's crazy. Okay, so that should be 130. All right, so you see how we can just set that up. That's still too big. And so we're good to go just about on that. So now what we see some nice consistency on that. I really like that. We're good to go. So now no matter what, the heights are going to be set. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, I'm happy with that. We'll do the height a little bit less, 1 less. I'm picky like that. Good, I like that. So now we can set automatically. Everything's automatically set. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we increment the top position. It means give each one a space. If we want them closer together, we'll just add maybe 25. If we want them farther apart, of course, we can do that. So it's going to put them closer together. Maybe we'll do 28. Like that. Continuing on. So now what we do is we're just going to select something else. So that's all we have to do. So that's going to reset those shapes. So that's the same macro that ran every time we dragged and drop another one. It just simply reset those shapes. And then we just give it a label and then click OK. All right, good. I like that. That's looking pretty good. Let's take a look at what's next. So we've gone over, let's go over the clear form. Clear form is the one when we clear this data, that's the one that's going to automatically clear the form. So how are we going to do that? So essentially on clear form, I want to clear everything out. I want to clear all the pictures out. I want to clear any formats. I want to clear any data validation. Basically any text. So And of course, I also want to delete this database table. So the database table also must be deleted just like that. All right, so that's exactly what we're going to do inside the macro. So the form name as a name, right? We're going to do that. I want to make sure that we're clearing out all the named ranges too. If we look in the formulas name manager, right? We need to clear out these lists. That's part of the database. We need to clear out all the named ranges, form field. We need to clear out the picture field. So we need to delete these named ranges. The only named ranges we don't want to delete are the named ranges located here. So the only ones are these form fields here, but everything else I want to delete. So we're really clearing everything out here, starting from scratch pretty much. So first thing we want to let the user know, make sure there's a confirmation. Are you sure you want to delete this form and all of the data, right? The data is gone too. So it is dangerous. That's why we certainly have an edit mode. So we don't, when you're edit mode, that's what I'm thinking, adding some security onto this. So only an admin could do that because it could get dangerous. Deleting all the data in all the forms is quite dangerous. So be careful with it. It's awesome. It's flexible, but you would never want to give this ability to an end user who's just using the form. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's why user security could be really good addition on this one. So getting the user to making sure that they want to delete all the data. And then with the form, right, you could also add more, like you could say, please write in the word delete or something like that. Are you sure? Something. You can add additional security because it gets dangerous. Deleting all that data is very dangerous. So adding additional security, additional steps, probably a good idea. So first of all, we're going to set B1 to true because when I make changes to all these, I want to make sure nothing happens. So this B1 is going to go to true, then it's going to go to false. And the reason is because when we make changes to here, this is one kind of change. So we want to differentiate these kinds of changes. Okay. All right, so B1 is going to go to truth, and we'll send that back to false at the end. So continuing on, I want to turn off application display alerts to false. And the reason is when I delete the sheet, I don't want to get an alert saying, are you sure you want to delete this sheet? So I want to make sure that we're turning off application display alerts, and then we're going to turn it right back on. So what we're going to do then is we're going to make sure that sheets, if for some reason it didn't exist or something, it could come in error. So whatever's in B2, that's the sheet name. We're going to delete that sheet. And if it didn't exist, it could create an error. Therefore, we wrap it on and resume next. So now what I want to do is I want to remove all of the picture shapes. So notice that here, the picture shapes here, located here, records called record pick 7 or record pick 8. So I want to delete all these pictures. So any picture that says record pick or has that text in there, the name called record pick, I'm going to delete it. So we're going to loop through all the shapes inside the sheet. Any shape that contains the string record pick, we're going to delete it. Pick shape, delete. Delete all pictures. Let's put some notes here. Delete all pictures. Once pictures are all deleted, we're going to loop through that. We're going to turn back on display alerts. We're turning that back on. Once the sheet's been deleted, we can have that on. Then what I want to do is I want to hide the record button set. This is the set. I want to hide this. We're not deleting it. We're just hiding it. So we're going to hide that. And then the user can then move it to wherever they want. We're going to clear. Remember, clear. Usually we use clear contents, which clears the values. We're actually clearing all the formats, all the data validation, everything from all the way from D3 through P99. So starting right here in D3, all the way down, we're clearing all the cells. And the clear is the same thing as if we use this clear here. So clear all clears everything, not just the contents, but all the formats as well. Once we've done that, what I want to do is I want to give it a very specific theme. Color accent 5 is just this simply light blue theme. And that light blue theme also includes this tint and shade. So that's just the light blue background. We're taking all those cells, we're changing the interior theme color, resetting it back to that blue. Now what I want to do is I want to clear all the named ranges, but I want to make sure I don't clear out all the named ranges in the workbook. I don't want to clear out anything that says default field, date field, amount field. I only want to clear out very specific named ranges. I only want to clear out named ranges that contain the word string form field or contain field list or contain form picture. So we're going to loop through all the entire workbook, all the names in the workbook. So form name, we've already dimensioned it as a name. So we have to dimension it as a name. So we're going to loop through all the names inside the workbook, each form name in this workbook. If the name contains form field, we're going to delete it. If it contains field list, we're going to delete it. If it contains form picture, we're going to delete it. So what that's going to do here, remember, this is a form field here. This is a form picture here, so we're going to delete that all. And then, of course, the lists, right? We want to make sure that we do those lists, those data validation lists that we had here, those field lists. Remember, those field lists are based formulas in name manager. Those field lists we created, 1 and 2, we need to delete those as well. So that's important. So we're deleting those. Now all the name ranges that have been deleted except for the ones on the admin sheet. Now what we want to do is I want to delete the record ID, this specific name range called record ID. I want to delete that. That'll get created again once we create a new workbook. And I want to delete the header fields. Those are two inside there. So these are the ones that were here. Let's take a look back all the way here. This named range, record ID, that's going to get deleted, and the ones called fields, we're going to delete that. That's the ones that cover here. So both of those get deleted. Now we're going to run again that macro reset form shapes, and we're going to set B1 back to false. So we're going to reline up the sheets. So when I clear the form data, you click yes, it's going to clear everything else, reset the form shapes, clear all. So if we look in the formulas, the name manager, see what's left. Amount field, date field, default label, form back, and number field. Only those named ranges that are on the admin screen. Everything else has been cleared out. All those named ranges are now cleared. Notice there's no more database, only have 2 sheets here, and it's completely gone. So it's a really nice way to completely clear it out. But again, it is dangerous. So be careful, right, with that. All right, continuing. It's very flexible, but could be dangerous if you have a lot of data start up. Of course, remember, if you're always saving your work in a folder like Dropbox or something like that, you can go back to revisions, 1 month, 1 day, 1 hour. So that's okay too. We have a lot of availability. So if something gets deleted, you can just do save as a different file. So keep that in mind. All right, let's do a quick recap. I believe we do have to cover delete, field, clear form we've covered. We've covered reset form shapes. We've covered edit mode, right, how we move back and forth. We've covered item select. We've covered check from move as we move down. Now, all the way down here at the bottom here, we've already covered all that. Remove field. This is a great little item now. It's here. Let's go ahead and add some fields. Let's go create a search field up here, just as we've done before. So we can have this field. We'll enter a database again. Let's do customer. Any database is fine. And then we'll go ahead and the filtered list here, put that in here. See how fast it is? We'll do a text field up here, and we'll call this customer name. And then we're going to add another field, customer type here. Drop that down here, customer type. And we'll add in just test 1, test 2, okay? Okay, adding those 2 types, and then amount field, let's see, customer balance, okay? Customer balance. And then we'll add the button set in, which is very easy. Button set, just drag that over here. Okay, so now we've got the button set, and we've got a little form. We've already built it out just like that. And Fred, we'll add some data in there so we can save it. So now what we want to do is I want to make sure, and we want to put in Fred's name, so we'll put a customer name here. So what I want to do is I want to be able to delete a field. So now if I delete customer, right, customer type, which is the second column, I need to make sure that customer balance moves to the left. And if we take a look inside here, customer balance is form field 4. This is form field 3. This is form field 2. Number 1 is reserved for the ID. So if I move this, we have to do a few things. I need this form field, it needs to be changed to form field 3. And of course, the position will stay the same, but inside the database, I need to make sure that customer type gets deleted. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what we want to do is to mention the database column. I need to know what database column it's located on. That's very important because I need to know what column to delete. I also need to know the last database column. That's also very important because the last column, right, I need to move the columns over. So we also want to do, I also want to make sure that we don't upset this. This is very important, AA, AC, and AD. So these are very important. So if I delete one column, I need to insert it. I need to insert another one right here. Right, so because I want this to stay on AA and I want this to stay on AC because I need to know where those filters are coming from. So we need to do those few things. So the first thing I want to do is determine the deleted database column. What is the database column that we're going to be deleting? And how do we know that? Well, even if it's I want to add a picture field into here. Well, even if it's a picture field, regardless, we have the name of the cell. That name of the cell, that name is called form picture. Notice it's very specific. Form, 4 letters, PICTR, 5 letters. So it's 9 characters, then the number. If we take a look inside here, form field, 4 and then 5. So we have 9 characters in the number. So if I take that named range here for that cell, and I get rid of the first 9 characters, it's going to leave me with the number. That number is associated with the columns, column 2, column 3, 4, or column 5. So, right, so the picture. So regardless if it's a picture field, so in other words, we have to differentiate the names because we have to know whether to show the folder or not, but we want to make sure that we can extract the column. And so all we need to do is just make sure that it's the same number of characters. So to do that, we just need to remove the first 9 characters, and we can do that here. The database, deleted database column, replace, again, we're going to take the active cell name, it's this one right here. Once we select it, because this X only shows up when we select active. So the active cell name, what is the name? I know it's name, kind of strange, but that's how we get this. I want this, and I want to put that, I want to remove the first 9 characters from that. So to get that, it's called active cell name. Then what I want to do is I want to take that and I want to remove the first 9 letters. To do that, we can use the replace command. So we're going to replace it. What am I going to replace? I'm going to take the first 9 characters using the left of that active cell name, and I'm going to replace it with nothing. That's going to leave me with the deleted column, let's call it column, database column, delete. So that's the column that we're going to be deleting. If there's any error, something's wrong, right, we need to exit the sub out. That's why we wrap it in on error, resume next, and on error, go to 0. Assuming that we do have a correct database column, we're going to focus on the form. If B2 is empty, then exit the sub. That means there's no database. Obviously, if there's no database, there's nothing. But I seriously doubt that would happen because almost everything we're doing, we add the database automatically. So we're going to set that database name to equal what's in B2. Then we're going to do the form field. What I want to do is I want to delete the existing named range. If I rename it, let's say I want to delete this field. So this field is going to be called form field 4. Form field 4 is going to change to form field 3. But the only way to do that is to delete this named range, form field 3. I need to delete that named range. So we're going to do that right here. This workbook names, form field, and the delete column, delete existing named range. Okay, but if it's a picture, we're going to delete it here. So we don't know if it's a picture or not, or if it's a field. We could test it out. We could put that in a variable probably. We could extract it and put it in a variable. But we're just going to wrap it in on error, resume next, and on error, go to 0. So we're going to check either one of those we're going to be deleting, whether it's a picture or whether it's a regular field. We're going to delete the name if it's a picture field. Next up, we're going to determine the last database column. That's very important. So the last database column, in this case, is 5 because I need to go through all of it. If I'm deleting customer type here, I need to loop from 3 to 5 and change these and change the names of these from 2 to 3, 3 to 2. Right? So what I'm saying is here, if I delete customer type, I need to go look anything after that and change it from form field 4 to form field 3 because we're doing the database. And I'll show you how that works in just a second. So the last database column, we need to determine that based on the database name, Z1, and XL to the left. So that's going to get us the column. It's going to extract that column. Column is 5. So we need to extract that. In this case, column is 5. Now what I want to do is if the database column is the last database column, we don't need to rename. And what does that mean? That means if I'm removing this field here, which is already the last here, then I don't need to no, sorry, this one's here. This is our last here. This is our last field. If I'm removing the last one, we don't need to rename anything after it. We just simply need to remove it. Okay, so we can skip the rename if it's already the last column. If it's not the last column, what I'm going to do is going to take that database column plus 1. Here's the database column right here, 3. Let's see. So I'm going to loop. Here's the database column 3. So I'm going to loop from 4 to 5, loop through those, and rename them, rename the named ranges. So here, this is going to go to form picture 5. This is going to go to form picture field 5. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Here we're going to add that in. So we're going to do, actually I just saw an error. Here's the problem. Here's a problem with this. What if it's a picture? We can't add form field. So what we need to do is we do need to add that variable inside a string. So let's call it field string as string. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this. This is really important, okay? So because it could create an error. So I'm going to do it now. So what is that field string? It's simply this here. Put it right here. So it's this here plus it's the left. So this is going to do it right here, equals this. Equals this. So our field string is basically the left 9 characters. This is our field string. Field string. I like that much better. Okay, so now what we're going to do, so now we have it. Now we can remove this. So the form field string we know already is this here. Whatever it is, we're going to delete it, whether it's picture, whether it's form. We don't need both, so either one would work. The field string database, okay. And now what we need to do is we just need to change this. Okay, so regardless of whatever, so that means if it's a picture or it's form, perfect. Okay, that's much better, saving that work. And we'll test it out in a minute, hopefully it'll work. So continuing on, so we're going to, regardless of what it is, if it's a picture, we've already put it in a string variable, we're going to then update it. So what we're gonna do is we're going to go from the +1 here, I know it's kind of confusing, for changing the name. So let's do that, let's just show you what it is. So remember, this is form picture 5, this is form field 4, this is form field 3. So if I delete this one, this should be form field 3 now. This is 2, this is 3, and this should be form field 4. Nearly one more thing to add on that, one more thing, a little bit different here. So what we need to do is I'm going to take this one, I'm going to drop it down here, I'm going to put it here, so it's going to be equal to not the active cell, not this active cell, but whatever this is. Okay, so we're going to copy this. I'm going to place it right here. That's going to get us what we want to do. Okay, that I like that. That looks better. So what we're going to do is basically whatever this is, we're going to change it, right? So whatever. So now let's add another picture just so we can get that correct. So now notice when I select on this, no envelope comes up because it's form field. It's not a picture. But if we add another picture here, and then just call it pic 2, it will have that. So what I want to make sure is I want to make sure to keep that form picture. So now if I delete this one and adding one more name on here, name. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to take the additional, name. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever current name is, and that's what's going to be the field string. So basically whatever it is, meaning if we have a picture here, picture, whatever. So let's redo this. I just don't want to make sure we're doing the same thing. I'm going to show you again. Again, adding a search field, putting in a database here, test the database here, adding a filtered list here, putting that in here. And then we'll add some text fields here, putting in the text fields here, and then just putting in name. And then let's put in a date field. And I'm going to show you also we're going to put in some picture fields so we can make sure that the picture field is automatically updated. So in that picture field, pick 1, and so we can see the difference here. Okay, and then pick 2. There we go. I like that. So what we want to do is when we delete a field, we want to make sure that these names, picture 1, picture 5, form picture 5, form picture 4, here, form field 3. So I'm going to delete this. So now this stays the same. This goes to form picture 3. Notice the folder stood up, and this form picture 4. Perfect. So we're just keeping the name. We want to keep that name. All right, I like that. That looks good. Let's continue on with the code. So we've updated this to name. So we're extracting that field string from whatever field, and we're simply updating that field string with one less than the database. Basically, this goes from 5 to 4. This goes from 4 to 3, and that's because we deleted the column and now we have different columns. So let's continue on to show you how we're doing. So we simply loop through this. This just basically renames the named ranges for one less database column, and then we have to delete the database column. That's what we're going to do here. This deletes the database column. When I delete a database column, I also again want to make sure that this stays on AA, right? That's our form, that's our filter. We want to make sure that they stay there. So to do that, we need to insert one more. Active sheets, inserting one more. This maintains the column for our criteria and for our advanced filter, which I'll show you. Then what we're going to do is we're going to clear the active cell. Right? I'm clearing this active cell. I want to clear it out, so we've cleared it out. And just one more thing left to do. We need to copy this field string. We also need to delete it before the existing, right? The existing cell has a name we need to delete. It's not the database column, right? That is going to be the deleted database column. Deleted database column. That is the name range we have to delete here. We have to define that field string here. We can define it 2 different times, defining that here. So now that's the one, that's the selected one. Notice it's form picture 3. So when I delete that, that cell must be also deleted. So now this turns to 3, this turns to 2. Okay, so now we have that 2 and 3. So perfect. Okay, so we see how we delete that, and we made those updates live. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to make sure that we also update the field string here and delete those item cells. So as we loop through the cells, clearing the cells. Okay, we're also going to clear the active cell offset 1 column to the left. That means not only am I going to clear this cell here, I'm going to clear the one to the left too. So I want both of those cleared out, the one to the left. So we can use offset, clearing the one to the left and the current one. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that form background, this one right here, this form back located in C3, And for both of those, I'm going to paste that in here, that form background here. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste special. I'm going to paste the active cell, pasting that format for the active cell, and also for the one to the left of that. Then also that delete button, I want to hide it. So that way when I do this and I click delete, both the field and the label get deleted and everything gets cleared out. And of course, the database gets cleared out and only left with them. Okay, great. So that is how to get a little bit confusing with those renamings, but that's how we remove the field. All right, great. So we've covered everything on the drag and drop. All we have left is the form fields and a few on the add an update. And of course, when we do the filter, the advanced filter. So I'll be showing you that too. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the form macros. The form macros, those are going to be how we load it, when we select. Let's go ahead and add some data, create a new form. We'll add this form. And let's go ahead and clear it and start from scratch again, just so we can follow the process. Okay, we're going to add a search field here. We'll add in the customer employee database here, employee. And then we'll be working with this one and on the filtered list as we've done a few times before and adding that. And then of course we'll add the employee name up here into G, and then we'll just call this name. And we'll add a drop-down list for the employee type, right? We want to know the employee type. We'll add type here, and we'll just do service, and then tech, and then we have office. All right, and then what we'll do is we will add in the date field and just get some data in there. And that should be something. Then we'll do a picture here so we can add that in. And then lastly, the picture. So we'll get in this. So what I want to do is I want to show you how we can add, update, and do that. And we'll call this pic, okay? And adding in a picture here. And then, of course, we need that button set. Pulling in the button set here. Perfect. So see how quickly Fredders. And then we'll just do, he's a tech here. And, dude, I clicked X. That's not what I wanted. Okay, drop down list here. Adding that drop down list here. And then type. I think we need to be careful of that because I put the X so close to the type. And then just go field, tech, office. Thanks for your patience on this one. Now we have that drop down list. Careful not to click the X. I think it's a little bit close on there. Taking off the edit mode would certainly help. That wouldn't come up. Right, so we'll save this employee and we'll have him show up here as we change the name. So what I want to do now is show you one macro when we load it, everything on here. That doesn't look like Fred, does it? Fred looks more like this. Okay, so we're going to save him. And what I want to do is it'll save or update. So that means we're either saving a new one or we're updating it. Now to do that, we need to know what row this Fred is on. What database row. If we look in the database row, we see Fred's located on 4. And we know Fred's ID 1. So we're going to put that ID here, the record ID, and we're going to extract the row that it's on using the match formula, B5, which is the record ID, using the match, and we're adding 3 because our first one starts on row 4. So we're going to add that. We also want to know the next record ID using the max formula, record ID plus 1. And if there's an error, it means no data. Our first one's going to be 1. So if I want to know if Fred is an existing employee or a new employee, all I need to do is look for the row here. If he's got a row here, he's an existing employee. If I click new and record row, it is a new employee. So B6, if blank, then we know. So the first macro we're going to focus on is load, and that's the one that's going to load it. So let's add in another one here, David, and we'll just save it without anything. So now we notice David. So the first macro is going to load those employees based on any search criteria here. So what I want to do is load that list, but I only want to load the ones based on this. Oops, David here. Not David's name is not record ID. We want to search by name, right? Of course, name. David, that's what I want to search for. So I only want to know based on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to run an advanced filter. And if we look into the database here, we'll just shrink these columns up so we can see everything. And then what we want to do is I want to look for any name that contains David. I want to have the results to come here. I want to have the ID and I want to have the name. And I want to bring those in here and I want to bring them directly inside here. Having the ID here located in D8, which is here but hidden, and having the name here. Okay, so the idea is I want to load this list up, this list of names. Let's clear out the filter. Probably should include a clear filter, but if I just delete the name here, it'll show both. So basically what I want to do is I want to load this list up. So I want to clear any information. I want to load it up. So to do that, let's see how we do that. So to do that, it's going to be load list. Now, when do we want to do that? When I want to do that is a few times. After I save a new one, if I make any change here, or if I make any change here. So there's a few different events. Let's go over the macro first, and then I'll show you when that's going to happen. Okay, so with the form, if range B2, that's our database, right? Our database, we need a database. If we don't have any database, we can exit the sub. Also, B9, if we don't have a filter column, we can exit the sub. Now, what is that filter column exit on no row? I need to know what column we're filtering by, right? If we look at this, well, I need to know, am I showing names or am I showing something else? Am I showing dates or pictures or types? If I'm showing types, I need to know what to show here. How do I know what to show? Well, the best way to do that is to set a column here. How do I know what column is going to be based on what's located in B9? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look. I'm going to run a match. I'm going to base it on here. Now we know we've got a named range called fields. That's all of our header rows. So if I run an indirect based on B4, now B4 is our list cell. Remember, B4 is our list cell. We know it's on E7. E7 is located here. So if I determine what name is it, because we don't always know, remember, they could put filter here or here or here. We don't know where. So we need to, this is going to tell us where our filter is cell, our filter. So I'm going to look here. I'm going to run an indirect based on that. I want exactly the column or the row is located on. So this means it's the second name. If we want ID, it's going to be number 1. So it's the column. So what that's going to tell me to do is going to know which column to filter by, which one to show. How do I know that? Well, I want to know whether I'm showing names here or whether I'm showing something else. Maybe I'm going to be showing IDs here. So if I'm showing IDs, it is the IDs that I want here. So whatever's located here in AD is going to show. AC is always going to be ID, but whatever's in AD is going to show. So I need to know what to show on the results here. So that's what's going to be. So as soon as I change this to name, so this is going to tell us, this number is going to tell us, is it 1, which is the IDs, is it 2, which is name, date, pick, or type? That's what's going to show here. So that's what I'm going to put directly inside here, inside AD1. So we need to know that column number. That column number is located right here. It's very important. And if there's nothing here, then we if it's deleted, we know not to show anything, right? That we can't load anything up unless we add something else. Okay, so that's why B9 is so important. Okay, the view column, we're going to put that, we're going to call it view column. We're going to put it in, that's going to come from B9. The database name is located in B2. The filter column, what's the filter column? The filter column is located in B4. This is the list column, right? The filter list column. And if we take a look inside here, what is the column that's associated with B4? What's the column? I know the column is column E, so it's column 5, right? So we just want to take the column here, column E, and I want to extract the column from that. So range E4, because I want to know what column we're filtering on. We're going to be filtering on column E, which is also column 5. I want to put that in a variable. And also I want to know the filter row. What is the row that's associated with that? Because these are always dynamic, so I can't use it. The filter row is going to be located the row that's associated +1. Our first filter row is going to be located here in 8. How do we get 8? I'm going to take whatever's in E7, the row from E7, and I'm going to add 1. So I'm taking the row, here's the row from whatever's in B4, which is E7, B4 is E7. So the row here is 7, +1 is 8. So I know the filter row is 8. I know the filter column is 5. Okay, that's going to help us moving forward. B8, we're going to clear the select row. When I select a row, I want it highlighted. But when we refresh this list, certainly we don't want it refreshed. So we're just going to clear out B8. Okay, continuing on. Now what I want to do is I want to clear any existing data. We're going to start, because it's dynamic, I can't say we're going to clear D8 through E and all the way down, right? Because what if they take this and they put it over here? It's always dynamic. That means, so we can't set specific cells. We can't say, okay, clear out D8 through E. We have to use a little bit trickier. We need to know what column and what row. So it's a little bit trickier because it's always dynamic. So it's the filter row, that's 8. Filter column -1. This is the filter column 5, right? But we also need to clear out the IDs. So it means filter column 4 through filter column 5, starting in filter row 8 all the way down to, let's say, 99 or something like that. That's the range that we're setting up. So the cells of filter row, which is 8, filter column, which is 5 -1. So this is 4. That's our starting point. and then plus a large row, right, large all the way down, and the filter columns, which is 5. We're just going to clear all those cells out. So that's going to basically clear all of this out. Okay, once that's cleared out, we're going to set the database worksheet equal to whatever's the sheet's database name. We're setting that database to the database worksheet. We're going to focus on that database worksheet. We're going to get the last database row based on what's in row column A, right? That's going to get us the last database row. If the last database row is less than 4, we can exit the sub. That means there's no data. The last database column is based on Z1. I need to know the last column based on Z1. So the last column Z1 all the way back. Last column is E. That's going to be 5. So our last column is column 5 in this case. So we're going to put that last database column into a variable. I also want to set the results here at AC1. I must have the results. AC1 is going to always be the ID, and AD1 is going to be variable. It's going to be variable based on whatever the user has put in here. Certainly we could match that right here. We could simply say AD1 equals, but we don't know what cell this is in, right? We don't know exactly what cell it's in because they could have put it in anywhere else. So we don't know it's going to be E. So what we're going to do is we're going to take here and we're going to determine the column based on this number here. So we can do that here. So 81 is simply equal to the database row 3, right? We know our database, our data headers are row 3. We know the column, we know dates 3, we know names 2. So if name is 2, we know column 2, row 3 is name. So we're going to take that here. Let's put that column, row 3, always dynamic column 2. We're going to set the results. So that's what's going to go in AD1. So that means names is what I want in the results. So the ID is always here, static, and the name. So it's names, that's exactly what we're going to get our results in. So we've set our results. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run our advanced filter. So we're going to set up range. So what's our advanced filter? It's going to be based on cells where this is our first row. It's always going to be row 3, column 1. It's always going to be that. But what about our last? It's always going to be our last column by our last row. So we're going to set that range based on our first column, our third row with our first column. And then here's our last database row and our last database column. This is the range of our data. We're going to set an advanced filter. Our criteria is always going to be AA1 to AA2, always going to be here, criteria, if there is any. And so, for example, if I were to type in a name of Fred, right, we're going to set our criteria here, Fred. Our criteria is always going to be, and I'll show you how we arrive at this criteria in just a moment once we work through. So our criteria is A1 through A2. Our results are going to come here. So our results are going to always copy to range AC1. Our results are always on the same data, right? So the database always has the same AC1 through AD1. We're always going to have 2 columns of results, and they're always going to be here. So we're going to check the last results row based on AC2. If it's less than 2, we have no data. If we do have data, we're going to take our data and we're going to bring it over. So again, we're going to set our data inside our form as variable. We don't know what row, we don't know what column, but we do know we've set it already. It's going to be based on that filter row, 8. Filter column, which is 5 minus 1. So 5 is our starting point. Why? Because we need to bring in the IDs on this column 4. The IDs go in column 4. The names or whatever it is goes in column 5. So that's our second part. Form. So our first part, our first cell is here. Our second range is here. Filter row minus 2. Why do we subtracting 2? Because our first row here starts on row 2. So our first row starts where we must subtract 2 here. And then so we're subtracting 2. Then what we're going to do, the last results row and the filter column. We're going to bring it all in here. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to also then bring it in from whatever's in AC2 through AD in the last results row. That's going to bring over all of our results. And that's it. That's all we have to do with that list. Now, when does that trigger? When does this record list trigger? When does it happen? Well, it happens on a few times. It happens on save, okay, which we're going to do. It also happens on when there's a change to here. Right, if I clear this out, that's a change. I want that to let it. And it also triggers on here. So there's a few different times that it triggers. So how do we do that? Well, that's going to be in change event. When I make a change here or make a change here, this is on a macro here. So when I make a change, let me show you those change events. That's going to happen inside our form here, inside the worksheet change event. So the first thing is when we're creating the form, when we're adding fields and things like that, remember we're setting B1 to true. So the first thing, if we're making those kind of changes, I don't want to continue on. So if B1 equals true, we're going to exit the sub out. Also, if we enter if there's any change to B1, any change at all, I want to exit the sub. Those kind of changes I'm not interested in. Okay, we're going to dimension the search field as a string. I need to know what search field. That's going to be B3. I also need to know the filter field. That's going to be in B4. We're going to put those. The database name and the filter by, sorry, it's called filter by. That's going to be whatever's located in B4. And the database name. The search field is going to be located in B3, right? That's the search field address. If the search field is empty, we're going to skip the search. We don't need to search. The filter by also string is going to be in B4. That's the filter by address. Okay, so if we make any change to the search field, this case, of course, it is E5. If there's any change to E5 and B1 equals false, making sure that there's no changes, then we're going to run that search. If B2, that means if the user makes a change to this cell here, E5, if there's any change to here, I want to make sure that we have the database. B2 is empty, then exit the sub, right? Without the database, we can exit the sub, obviously. We don't, without a database, we can have that. The database name is B2. Okay, so now what we're going to do is a target value. That's whatever the user's changed, right? If Fred or whatever, if I type in Fred, that's the target value. But I don't want to search, I want to search for any name that contains Fred. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Fred, I'm going to add the asterisk, the wildcard before it and after it. And then I'm going to place it directly located right here inside AA2. So we've done just that if it's not blank. If it's blank, what are we going to do? I'm simply going to clear this field out. So if I decide to put in a blank value and delete that, I'm then going to clear this field out, AA2. Otherwise, I'm going to put it. So if target value is empty, then the sheets, the database name, AA2, clearing the contents. Otherwise, we're going to take whatever the user entered, and we're going to put an asterisk before it, then whatever the user entered, and then the asterisk, and then we're going to place that in AA2. Then we're going to simply run the macro that we just went over called record list load. Okay, great. That's it for this one, right? That's all if we change. But what if we make a change to here? So that means a change event by filter by, which is located here. So if the user makes a change there, if the filter by equals empty, then exit the sub. However, if the user makes a change to the filter by cell, and B1 equals false, then again, just run the macro to run the load list. That is it. That's all we have to do. So any change on here, automatically loads that list. Okay, while we're on this sheet, let's go with a few selection changes here while we're there, and then we'll get back to the macro. So because I want, if count large, we wrote this. If the user makes a selection to any large cell, it can exit the sub. If B1 is true, we're exiting the sub. I don't want to focus on any selection changes when there. So we're going to dimension the range, okay, the record range as a range and the filter range as a range. If B16 value equals false, then B16 value equals true. What does that mean? Well, if we take a look at shape move, remember, I just want to make sure that shape move is always set up here. If we make a selection change, and that means basically if I select something and I select something else, I want to set that true. Remember, we have a loop running. It's waiting for us. It's waiting for us to make a change. But if I select something else, I want to exit that loop. If I select, so by setting this to true, it automatically exits that loop. Remember, B16. So that's exit. Let's just put exit loop. Let's call it waiting loop if X exists. Okay, if we exist. All right. So that's all. So now also there's some buttons, the delete field button and the add picture button. This field I don't want to hear, and this here I want to basically hide these two buttons if I make any selection. So by doing this, if the delete field button equals visible equals true, if it's visible, then hide it. Don't delete it, hide it. Same thing with the add picture button, that folder there. If it's visible, then simply hide it. So we're hiding delete button. Thanks for sticking with me on these super long trainings, but this is a really cool one. And then hiding folder button. I always appreciate it. Don't forget to smash that like button if you appreciate me running through these really amazing trainings. So, and on arrow go to no field. So on selection of editable field mode. So if I make a selection here and the edit mode is on, then I want to show that X. However, if it's off and I make a selection, I don't want to show that X. So how do we know if the edit mode's on? Well, we're going to check the text here on this shape. If it's on, then we know it's on. So we're going to do that. If not intersection, if user makes a selection, anywhere selection, and the edit mode is back, right? The edit mode here is on, meaning we're on edit, and I want to make sure that the target name form contains the word form. What does that mean? That means that if the named range contains the word form, it does here, How about on picture? Yep, it does here. So that means the name of the cell that was checked contains the string form. Then I want to show the X. So those three, again, we make a selection somewhere on the sheet. Edit is on. And we've also selected a field where the name contains form. If all three of those things are true, then we want to show that form. So let's look it over. I'm going to bring this over here. Again, we made a selection here. The edit mode is set to on. And we've selected a field where the target name contains the word form. If all that is true, then we are going to, with the shapes delete button, we're going to show it based on the left position of the target cell. I want one column over to the right, and I want to move it a little bit over to the right, and that's the left position. The top position is based on the target cell top position -5, and we're going to show it visible. Okay, great. What about the selection of a picture field? On the selection of a picture field is a little bit different. We want to make sure edit mode is not necessary here, but we do want to make sure that the name contains form PICTR. PICTRs, right? This one doesn't contain PICTR, but this does. If we take a look here, PICTR is contained right here. So we see that it does. In that case, we want to place that folder. And we want to place that folder basically the same position, but a little bit higher up on the left and the top, and making it visible. Okay, great. So that's everything for, oh, there's one more for selection change, right? On the selection of record load, that's right, one more. One more selection change event. When I make a selection change here, I want to load the associated record. So this particular one, if the user, now we don't know exactly where, right? We don't really know where it is. It could be anywhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to check. Based on that filter range. First of all, B4 equals empty, then exit the sub. What is B4? B4 is our filter list. We must have a filter list in order to select anything, right? If it's empty, then we cannot. How do we know where the filter list starts? Well, it basically starts right here plus one row down, right? Taking this row starts one row down. So we know the filter range is based on B4. So what is the record range? The record range, the entire range of that record, is based on the filter range offset one row down, right? One row down than that filter. The row, that's the row that we're setting, right? I want to set that row plus the column, the filter range column. That's the first part. The last part is the same column here, the same column, plus the row. We're just going a large row down, 999. So this sets our entire range. Basically, it starts out one row down here, all the way down to 999. So that's going to set. So now we've set that range. Now what I want to know is, has there been a selection change within that range? So now we can run it. If the record range is nothing, then exit the sub, just to make sure that it is something in case we haven't set it right. So now if the user makes a selection change within that range there, then we want to do something. Selection of, let's just say records, filter records. Let's say filter records. Okay, if they make a selection change in there, I want to make sure that there's a value, right? The most important thing is we need that ID. That ID is going to always be located to the left. It could be in any cell here, but it's always going to be located to the left. So when the user makes a selection here, I want to check to the column on that row, the column to the left, and make sure that that ID is located there. So we're going to check right here. If cells, the target row, the target column, the column that they selected, -1, the column before. If that value is empty, then exit the sub, because that's where ID is located. If it's not, what am I going to do? I'm going to take that ID, which is located right here in the column to the left. I'm going to place it in B5. We're going to look at it right here and place it directly here in B5. That ID is going to go here. So notice it changes from 2 to 1. So it's going to go right there. Then what I want to do is, for the conditional formatting, I want to put the row, that row that they've selected, in B8. That's going to trigger it. So if I select 9, B8 is going to take on that. That's going to trigger the conditional formatting. Very good. So, and the last thing is simply to load the record. That macro we're going to get to right now. So here we've been over the load list. Let's go in order. Now we're going to save and update. Relatively simple, not a big macro. First of all, I want to determine making sure that there is a database. If there's no database, we can't save anything. We can exit the sub. So B2 must contain a value. Assuming that it does, then we're going to set that to the database name. We're going to set the worksheet to the database worksheet. And we're going to set the last database column just as we have done before from Z1. If the last database column is less than 2, then please make sure to add in fields. That means there's no fields if there's nothing to save. We want to make sure the user has added certain fields before we save it. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to check for the database worksheet B1 value. If equals empty, make sure you add and make sure there's no blank sample. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that at least this row here, the first column, at least there's one value in here. There's always going to be an ID, but I want to make sure that they've added here. So we're going to check the second column in that row to make sure that there's a value there. And that's to do that, what we're going to do is make sure that they've added something in there. So if the database worksheet B1, meaning they haven't even added a second value. There's no second field here. So we want to make sure they added. So make sure that your field form is not blank before saving. So we're just double checking. Now what I want to know, is it a new record or an existing record? So if it's a new record, how are we going to know that? There's not going to be a row associated with that. B6 will be blank if there is no row. So we're going to determine if it's a new record, B6 will be empty. So we can do that. If it's a new record, I want to assign a new ID. That next ID is going to be located here in B7. So we're going here. So if B6 equals empty, it's a brand new record. That database row is going to be the first available row based on the database and one row up. B5 is going to take on that next record ID. It's going to come directly from B7, which uses the max formula. I also want to take that record ID that's from B7. I want to place it directly in column A in the record. So this is for our new. This is for our existing record. Our existing record, all we need to do is extract the database row directly from B6. And then we're simply going to run a loop using data mapping. I'm going to run a database from 2 to the last database column, starting here from 2 to the last database column E. And I'm going to extract these values. I'm going to look in H4 here, but looking in H4, and I'm going to say, okay, David, I'm going to put that in whatever row is located. I'm going to look in AHA here, H8 here, and I'm going to put in the date, and whatever date's located here, I'm going to put it directly in here. So I'm just going to loop from 2 to the last. So that's all we're going to do in here. The database worksheet, the database row, the database column is simply equal to the range. Where's that range located? It's located in row 1 of our database. Taking whatever, that's going to add or update the database. Then all we need to do is once save it, I'm going to refresh that, run that macro again. That's going to reload that list. And that way it's important because if I change David and I change the last name, we want to make sure that the last name gets added to the list. So Davis, if I change his last name to Davis, I want to make sure when I save it that the list gets updated here with his name. Okay. All right. So continuing on. So then also we're just going to put a message box that the database's name has been saved, right? So it just says employee has been saved, and that's it, using the database name. Next up, record new. This is going to be relatively easy, but I need to know what cells to clear out. How do I know what cells to clear out? They're all dynamic, right? Well, again, we can use data mapping. I know the cells are here. H4, AH8, I can use these, run a loop from the second column to the last column, clearing out the associated cells because they're located right here. And that's just what we're going to do here. So, but I'll also want to clear out all the picture shapes, right? Any pictures that might be here, we need to clear out. If I add a picture, I want to make sure that when we click new record, that picture gets added. How do we know that the picture is removed? Because the picture is going to contain the text record picture. So we're going to remove any shapes that contain that word. So we're going to loop through all the shapes in the sheet. If the name equals record picture, if it's greater than 0, then we're going to delete it. So we can delete all the pictures. Also, if range B2, there's no database, we can exit the sub. We're going to set that database name to B2. We're going to set the database worksheet to the sheet's database name. That's going to set our database worksheet. We're going to determine the last database column just as we have done before. We're going to run that loop to the last database column. We're going to extract the cell from row 1, just as I mentioned. We're going to extract that cell, clearing the contents of those cells right directly in the form here. And that's what we're going to do here. With that form, right, dot range, we're extracting the range here and we're clearing the contents. And then all we're doing is we're clearing the select. I'm going to clear the selected ID, the record ID located in B5, and I'm going to clear the selected row. So we're clearing out those two items. That way, when I click add new, everything gets cleared out. The record ID here, and we'll select a row. If I select another one, of course, it's going to get loaded in. Okay, great. So that's it for new. But what about load? Load, we know load happens when we make a selection change. That's the macro that's going to run here. So how do we do that? Well, that's relatively simple. Picture name as a name. I want to make sure that we're going to be showing that picture name if necessary. Again, I want to delete all the picture. If there's any pictures in there, deleting the pictures just as we did before when we're loading a new one. If there's no database, or there is no specific row, that we can exit the sub, right? We need a database and we need to know what row is located on. So both of those are required. So we can exit the sub if we don't have either one of those. Setting the database name, just to be done, setting the database worksheet, determining the last database column. Then the database row is going to be located in B6. So we're setting all that. We're going to run a loop in reverse. This time, whatever is located directly inside that row, and based on that, we're going to place directly in H4. This data is going to get into H8, and this is going to get in K4, and this one's going to be in H6. So we're just basically reversing the mapping and just adding the data here. And now what I want to do is I want to add any pictures. Now this is a little bit tricky, right? But what if there's two fields that have pictures? What if I decide I want to add another picture field? I need to make sure that we're going to add both of those pictures, right? So let's do this pick 2, right? Because we may want to add more than one picture. We'll do pick 2 and then click OK. Okay, I don't know why, but there might be some instances where you want to add 2 pictures. Okay, so when I load this, let's go back to David. There's no pictures. When I load this, I want to load in, oops, I forgot to save it. That was my fault. So let's add one more. I do need to save it. Save it. Okay. So now it's been saved. So now when we go here, there's no data. When we go here, I want to load both of those pictures. But how do I know? I don't even know where the fields are. How do I know? Well, we can loop through the database. We can look through the pictures, but we don't necessarily know by here which ones are pictures. We don't know. But how do we know they're pictures? We know that there's pictures because the name range is called form picture 6. So we know that. And we know that because it's contained form pictures. So we can loop through all the names. Anything that says form picture, then we can then determine that that's a picture. And we can check the cell if there's a value in there, and we can load it based on that. So that's exactly what we're going to do. For each picture name in this workbook, if the picture name contains form picture, then what are we going to do? Picture name refers to select. So what does that mean? Basically, what it's going to do is going to loop through all the name ranges. If one is found, I want it to select the cell. I just want to select the cell, and we can do this by here. Picture name refers to range, select. Select the picture cell. Select picture cell. Once we select it, we're going to run a macro called form show picture. This macro is going to run and display the picture, which we'll get to, displayed on the selected cell. So whatever the selected cell is, it's going to extract the path from that, and it's going to display the picture based on that. But we'll go in order. Okay, great. So we're going to get to that. That's right down here. So we'll get to that in just a moment. We just have one delete macro to go to, and that one's easy, relatively quick, few lines of code. So record delete. Are you sure you want to delete this record? Of course, that's the macro that's tied to this if we want to delete the record. If we don't, we're going to exit the sub out. With the form, we're going to make sure that there's a row. We need to make sure that there's a database. If we don't have either one of those, we're simply going to go to not saved, which is going to go down here, and then it's going to delete everything and clear it up. But if there is a database row associated and there is a database name, we just need to delete that associated row on the database. So that's all that does. And then we're going to continue on. We're going to delete any record pick, right? Any picture that exists, we should run a loop through this and actually delete that. I'll probably update that. We do need to run a loop on that. So if any sheet on record pick, but that's okay, because there could be more than one. So that's not going to help. Record delete, but that's okay. It's fine, because when we do add new, record new, we probably don't need this at all, actually. Why is that? Because add new takes care of that. Add new will loop through that and clear out any pictures, so we don't need that. So we'll do that, and then we're going to update the list. Great, that's it for delete. Relatively simple. Browsing for picture, that of course is the folder, right? When we select a cell, we see a folder. There's a macro that runs that allows us to browse for the folder. Relatively easy. We're going to dimension the form pick as a file dialog. We're going to set that form pick to application file dialog. We want a file picker. We're picking a specific file. And then we want to select a picture. So we're going to use some filters. We only want pictures. These are the picture filters. We only want one picture at a time, so multi-select. Okay, if there's no selection, we're going to go skip that. If there is a selection, we're simply going to take that selected item, which is the entire pathway, and we're going to place that in the active cell. And then we're going to show the picture. So this is the same macro that we're running up here, right? Same macro, form show picture. So when we browse for the picture, we want to show it. And when we loop through all the pictures, we want to show it too. So this is the macro this. So basically, whatever the selected cell is, if it's a picture, we are going to show it. So the picture path is as a string. The database column is, I want to know what is the database column. So how do I know that? Well, just in case we need to know that, I don't think we don't need the database column, but because I'm basically going to take whatever values here, but if it's been saved, we'll replace it. So the database column is basically 6. So all we need to do is remove form picture and we can get 6. So we're just extracting 6, putting in a database column. If the database, if is numeric, database column is false, then exit the sub. So what we're going to be doing is I want to delete any picture that might exist already. If I change this picture out, I want to make sure that we're deleting any picture. If I show this picture, I want to make sure to delete the existing picture and replace it. So we're going to delete any picture that might exist. I'm going to set the picture path as the active cell. This is not necessary here. I can delete that. We're just going to take it from the active cell, right? The active cell, that's the picture path, the active cell. If the picture path is empty, then exit the sub. I want to make sure that we're active cell, horizontal alignment, right? What does that mean? Because I don't want this text to bleed. Look, if it's like on the left, it's going to bleed all the way over. I don't want to look like that, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to set it in VBA to right justified, like here. So that's all we do right here. So alignment, horizontal alignment equals right. Now we're going to check that picture path. If the directory does not equal empty, we do have a picture path. We're going to insert that picture path. We're going to give it a specific name called, no, that's not the record. Oh yeah, that's fine. The record pick, that's the correct name, and the database column. It's a unique name based on the database column. We did need the database column. I needed the database column because I need to know, I forgot, because I need to give it a very unique name. So that's important. So I want to make sure that that picture name has that database column. That way it gives it unique. That's why we needed it. I forgot. So important. So we need the database column so we can give it a unique name. So that way, this is record picture 6. This is record picture 4. So they're very unique, right? Based on that. Okay, continuing on with the shapes record picture database column, locking the aspect ratio to make sure it's true, setting the width. If the width is greater than the height, we're going to set the width at 70, else we're going to set the height at 50. We're going to place the position based on the left position of the active cell, one column over to the right, plus 15. So it's going to be placed on the column plus 15. It's a little bit far over to the right. Maybe I'll just put it at 5. I think that's fine. So plus 5, right? Putting it there. And then also want to set the top position to the top position of the cell, right? And then making sure that it's visible. That is it. So that if I want to show the picture, if I want to load it, it's going to show the picture there. Oh, that's why I wanted it 15, because now the folder's hidden. See, forgetting that. That's why it's over, because we need to save space for the row and the X, right? So if we load that again, I want to make sure that we have space for the row and the X. And if we turn that off, then we'll just show the folder, right? Okay, very good. I like that. That's looking really good. Well, that is it. Amazing. Let's go over. I showed you how to create this incredible drag and drop where you can drag any field onto a form and quickly create your own form, your own database automatically, very easily. We're able to delete them very quickly. We're able to then search by, and using a filter, we're going to search by any type of record ID. If we want to search by only the first record, we can do that simply by searching it. We can also do a filter by name. We showed you how to do a filter by name, and also to clear out the filters. We can also display it based on any name and create basically pictures and add any type of form, creating forms and databases within literally a minute or less. I hope you have enjoyed this incredible training. If you have, go ahead and smash that like button. Let me know you watched till the end. Comment below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you soon for next training video. Thanks so much.